Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed. Does any other member wish to speak? The member from East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of this Honorable Parliament, the strength of the team is each individual member. The strength of each member is the team. That is a quote by a very successful NBA coach, Phil Jackson. It is indeed a pleasure for me to rise and speak as a member of Parliament for the District of East End and the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Planning, Agriculture, Housing, and Infrastructure, as well as the Ministry of Home Affairs, Youth, Sports, Culture, and Heritage. I want to thank the Honourable Premier for his confidence in me to work as a Parliamentary Secretary in these two important ministries. These appointments speak to the level of responsibility to which I have been entrusted. I want to assure him, my colleagues in the PAC government, and the people of these islands that his mission and charge will be carried out successfully. I also want to express my appreciation to my caucus colleagues for their support over the past 7 months and remind us that it is our responsibility to ensure that the PAC government policies and programs set out in the strategic policy statement are successfully realized. To my fellow members of Parliament on both sides of the House, we have an opportunity during our term in this Honourable House to deliver legislation relevant to our times and in keeping with the developing needs of these islands. And to my constituents of East End, my deepest appreciation for entrusting me to represent you in Parliament. I want to assure you that I have been working hard on your behalf in this government. I will serve you with humility, commitment, and sincerity. It will be my honor and duty to work diligently to improve the human, social, and the infrastructure needs in this very special and unique part of the island. The future of East End is bright, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I start my prepared contribution, I'd firstly wanted to say thank you to the Minister of Education, the Honourable Juliana O'Connor-Conley, whom I know we can all agree takes keen care and pride in our students, or in her words, my students. Her passion and dedication to the students and their future comes second to none, and I'm proud to know that our students are supported by a ministry led by the Minister with a heart such as hers. I can say, Mr. Speaker, that as one of the newest members of this House, I've quickly grown admiration for her attentiveness and stewardship. Under her leadership, the government has already been able to provide every primary school student with a laptop. That, of course, includes East End Primary School, Mr. Speaker. These laptops not only assist our students with assignment, but have also proven critical in the government's response to providing distance learning, especially now during a global pandemic. These laptops also enable our most vulnerable students who would otherwise not be able to access a laptop to remain connected and stay learning. This has eased the burden on parents, enhanced the students' learning abilities and experience, and bolsters our commitment to future generations. Aside from the laptops, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Minister for acquiring face masks and lateral flow test kits that help keep our students and teachers safe. To fulfill our undertaking in broad outcome number 1 of the strategic policy statement in this budget, as we've heard from the Minister of Finance, provides for what I mentioned earlier, plus funding for meals for every student in the Cayman Islands. And again, Mr. Speaker, this includes East End. Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of the listening public, broad outcome number 1 in the SPS is entitled, Improving Education to Promote Lifelong Learning and Greater Economic Accountability. Under this broad outcome, in points number 1 and 2, the government investments in education will raise the standard of public education while easing the burden on families who are most vulnerable in our communities. That, Mr. Speaker, is people-driven. I will be working closely with the Minister for development of a new early learning center and preschool that will better serve the needs of the Eastern districts, and I know that I have the government support for this. To the Honorable Minister of Education, on behalf of the students and parents of Eastern, thank you for all you do and you continue to do. Mr. Speaker, before I highlight the work that has been done in Eastern over the past few months and the improvements that are slated to take place over the financial year, I want to commend the Honorable Minister for Planning, Agriculture, Housing, and Infrastructure, Honorable J. Banks, for all the hard work that has been accomplished collectively over the past few months under his leadership. The ministry has made much progress in a number of areas, including supporting the agriculture sector to enhance food and nutrition security, investing in young Caymanians through training and development programs, streamlining processes at our public-facing departments for greater efficiency and service delivery, and improving the road infrastructure and progressing plans to develop our internet and telecommunications sector through investment of an underwater submarine cable. As it relates to agriculture, Mr. Speaker, the PAC government through this ministry has made the single most substantial investment of $3 million in the agriculture sector to support farmers under the Tropical Storm Grace Farmers Assistance Program, or project. Mr. Speaker, just a week ago, I had the pleasure of meeting some of these farmers when the Honorable Minister and I visited the Department of Agriculture and handed over checks to them to provide the relief for the loss and damage they suffered as a result of the storm in August. One of the commercial farmers and recipient of the grant, Ms. Evelyn Rocket, said she is thankful to the government for undertaking the initiative and for us placing priority on supporting local farmers. She stated that the assistance provided by the government will put farmers in a position where one day they will be able to produce more food for our people to meet their dietary needs, with the Cayman Islands less dependent on foreign food imports. Mr. Harold Watler from Sparky's Amazing Farm, located in my own district of East End, said he's grateful to the Ministry and Department of Agriculture for the assistance provided in getting farms back on track as Tropical Storm Grace and the COVID-19 pandemic caused major setbacks for them. Mr. Speaker, these farmers and many others, including East End farmers, are now able to get their farms up and running again. It is our hope, Mr. Speaker, that through the government's Farmers Assistance Project, commercial farmers will be able to resuscitate their production and continue to strengthen their resilience as they work to bolster our island's food nutrition security. I want to commend the Department of Agriculture for its work on this project, as well as the many other initiatives we do not hear much about in the media, Mr. Speaker. Over the past months, the agronomy unit in the department has hosted training interventions designed to boost technical capacity in the sector. They include plant propagation training and backyard gardening workshops in Cayman Brac, aimed at stimulating interest in backyard gardening and growing produce with the possibility of expansion into commercial operations. Close to 60 people attended these workshops. The unit has also conducted 250 extension visits, comprised both visits planned to established farmers and reactive visits to requests received from farmers and backyard gardeners. The Agriculture Health Inspection Services and the veterinary and livestock sections of the department continue to be extremely active with their focus on inspections of imported plants and products to safeguard the islands from the introduction of imported pests and diseases, as well as training of 5 local veterinary clinics. Mr. Speaker, while some made light of the recent matter of the recently escaped raccoons, it was through the efforts of the Department of Agriculture to recapture the animals that we are able to unequivocally state that the Cayman Islands maintain its rabies-free status. This is of utmost importance, as any change to this would not only pose a risk to human and animal populations, but would have significant implications as it relates to animal and human vaccinations. Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we all support the government's broad strategic outcome to strengthen the agriculture sector, the Ministry and Department of Agriculture are focused on the National Egg Strategy, the Cayman Islands Food and Nutrition Security Policy, and the Livestock Development Plan, which support the Cayman Brac Stud Bull Program and the Cattle Breeding Program. Plans are also afoot for the Animal Bill, Plant Protection Bill, Pesticide Control Bill, and the Agriculture Bill, which will provide the necessary regulatory and a legislative framework for a stronger agricultural sector. Mr. Speaker, it will be of no surprise that as the representative of the largest farming district, I firmly support any assistance and support the government can create and provide for our farmers. I understand just how important our farming industry is, and I wish to take the opportunity to publicly thank the Department of Agriculture, ably led by Mr. Eswick, and the Minister for his diligence in supporting our farmers. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to another strategic priority, investing and training in young Caymanians. In early September, I joined 50 young Caymanian men and women at the orientation session as Level 1 to Level 3 trainees in the Public Works Department apprenticeship program. I took the opportunity to encourage and remind them that this government is working to give them as many opportunities as possible for them to succeed. I want to commend the Public Works Department for stepping up to the plate by providing a medium through which Caymanians can develop craftsmanship skills to supplement the demand for a variety of technical and vocational areas important to the islands. We are truly appreciative to those PW employees offering themselves to be mentors to the trainees. As you may know, Mr. Speaker, training is provided in areas where there is a scarcity of local qualified job applicants, such as carpentry, masonry, plumbing, electrical installation, air conditioning and refrigeration, welding, as well as building and construction management. With increased opportunities in the construction and development sector at this time, it is in our interest to train and upskill the generations of Caymanian workforce. I wholeheartedly support the Minister when he noted that in his speech that he will be working with Mr. Miles from Inspire to Cayman to continue training of the Caymanian workforce. As the number of Caymanians seeking to enroll in the programs grows, the department is now working on plans to upgrade existing workshops to accommodate the delivery of other certification programs. It is my hope that during our term as government, the numbers of trainees in the apprenticeship training program will increase to double the current numbers. Turning to another subject area over the past months, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Vehicle and Driver's Licensing has taken several steps to improve the delivery of services to customers. These include launch of a revamped website offering customers an easier way to access information and services and complete transactions online. Increase online services and other options for customers who can renew and review their driver's license online. Customers can also book appointments for written and driving tests by calling the department's DVL customer support unit. Eventually, all services will be fully online. This government has been supportive of the agenda of the department to improve customer service. Mr. Speaker, the PAC government is also working to reduce the financial burdens of specific groups that utilize the services of DVDL. It has shown its commitment with reduction in fees for motor vehicle registrations, vehicle licenses, renewals, driver's license applications and renewals for people 65 years and older. As was noted earlier in the House, sir, we must take care of our aging population, sir. As a government that respects and cares for its elders, it is our hope that this move will improve the well-being of our valued senior citizens. I am proud, Mr. Speaker, to be part of a government that is committed to continuing to invest in the road infrastructure of our islands, while actively seeking to find alternatives to solve our transportation and mobility challenges. Road infrastructure, traffic, and housing are some of the pressing issues affecting my constituents in East End. Traffic has been a #1 concern for the residents of Grand Cayman, particularly for those people who commute from the eastern districts, East End, Northside, Bordentown, Savannah. I understand the difficulties and complaints from my people in East End, and I also understand how this issue affects the quality of life. I want to assure them, Mr. Speaker, that my ministry and the government is working on solutions to address the challenges. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Tourism and Transport also highlighted in his speech his desire to work on finding solutions to the traffic issues. It is also my intention to work closely with him so that East End will be the beneficiary of these solutions. The Honorable Minister of Planning, Agriculture, and Infrastructure highlighted the main road infrastructure works being undertaken across Grand Cayman, but I want to reiterate those that are taking place and are in the pipeline that will relieve the traffic for those of us coming from the east. These include Phase 1 of the east-west arterial from Hurst Road going east to Woodland Drive, expected to be completed by third quarter 2022. Phase 2 of the east-west arterial from Woodland to Frankstown, with an environmental impact assessment currently underway. Widening of Shamrock Road to 6 lane. This project is expected to be completed in the near future. It is our hope, Mr. Speaker, that these improvements will address some of the issues we face and make our mornings and evening commutes to and from the east more bearable. In addition to these projects, Mr. Speaker, the National Roads Authority has other works planned which will benefit the eastern districts. These include shoulder works from Frankstown Road Junction to Health City, which will be added safely for both motorists and pedestrians. Survivors Road and High Rock Drive, works to mitigate flooding in the low-lying areas that includes Welcome Way in East End. Over this financial year, the National Roads Authority will also be continuing with the Guardrail Program, the Island-wide District Roads Improvement Program, and the Hot Mix Rehabilitation Program. The government has also given its commitment to repair and upgrade farm roads in East End, with works to take place on the farm road leading to the long-term mental health facility. I'm very pleased with this move, Mr. Speaker, as this would be beneficial to our farmers for better access for the production and distribution of their produce. Mr. Speaker, for the first time in many years, we have some exciting projects coming online in East End. Mr. Speaker, the first of these projects I'm going to talk about is the new senior citizens' home. I'm therefore pleased to announce in the Parliament and for my East End constituents that with the support of this PAC government, one of its first acts was to purchase acreage around the existing home for the construction of a new facility for our seniors. This current facility was in such dire condition that the site had to be evacuated and residents were moved to West Bay. It has not been reoccupied since. Even if the current facility was to be upgraded and or repaired, it is too small for the new goals that we have and wish to achieve for the holistic care of our aging population. Mr. Speaker, during the election campaign, I made it clear to my constituents that a priority for East End, should I be elected, must be to return our elderly back to the district so that they can enjoy their sunset years. However, Mr. Speaker, in working with the minister responsible for lands, I'm happy that we are not just building a seniors citizen home, but we are actively planning for the rest of the property to be a part of the first affordable house lot program. Mr. Speaker, I know and I believe that if the minister speaks, she will touch on this a bit more in her contribution. But I will say I am excited for the new subdivision that will give Caymanians, especially my people in East End, an opportunity to own a little piece of their rock at an affordable price. Mr. Speaker, the development will have affordable house lots and much more amenities, including a new public beach and community center in the immediate vicinity of the senior citizens' home. I will continue to work with ministers and ministries responsible for the rolling out of this program in early 2022. To reiterate, the intention for the project is to integrate the following 3 land uses on the site: to construct a purpose-built older person facility with the provision of 24-hour assisted care of the residents, provide a series of minimum assisted living homes for our senior citizens that are mobile and desire the advantages of being close to care facilities and having structured visits by medical personnel, a series of affordable house lots aimed at our first-time Caymanian buyers. Finally, to complement the 3 land uses mentioned, we aim to provide integration of green parks within the project that will be key to bringing the community together. These uses must be master planned to promote the mixing of youth in our community, being shaped by the older generations of our country. These aspirations can only happen when spaces are shared and occupied by a range of citizens, a mix of generations that talk to each other in person that allows for the transfer of knowledge between them. Mr. Speaker, turning to housing in East End. Since the start of this year, the National Housing Development Trust has been undertaking a housing development project in East End. 7 more affordable homes are being built at Will Jackson Drive in the community that they already have established there. The Trust is also already in the planning phase for further projects, and so I want to encourage young Caymanians, especially East Enders, to visit the housing offices to learn more and sign up for applications when more opportunities become available. These homes are high-quality, sustainable homes with energy-efficient features. In addition, these homes come with granite countertops, wood cabinets, and porcelain floors that will add to their overall value. I'm encouraged that the Park government is focused on providing more housing opportunities for Caymanians. I pledge to give my support to the Minister and his team at the National Housing Development Trust as we work to revise the affordable housing policy to create a new strategy that will meet the demands of our Caymanian people. In support of plans to improve the East End community, works have been undertaken by the Facilities Management Department at the William Allen McLaughlin Civic Center, and to date, works on the flooring, ceiling, stage, and the air conditioning unit have already been completed. However, work is still in progress for the grease trap in the kitchen, bathroom renovations, and the installation of the electric vehicle charging stations. For the Elliott Conley Civic Center in Gun Bay, the following is being done or has already been completed. New chairs and tables completed. New kitchen appliances completed. Entry door replacement in progress. Basketball court resurface in progress. The procurement and installation of the basketball hoops is in progress. LED lighting upgrade in progress. The facilities team in the department has assured me that for this financial year coming, there will be a number of updates at all the civic centers, including works on the interior, video and audio equipment installation, security alarm system installations, automatic security lighting, and other areas. Again, these includes both these 10 civic centers. These upgrades will make it safer for the members of our community to increase their physical activity in a safe, fit-for-purpose facility. Mr. Speaker, as I said on the onset, as I turn to Home Affairs, I'm also proud to be the Parliamentary Secretary for Home Affairs, Youth, Sports, Culture, and Heritage. I'm honored to work alongside the Minister, Honorable Bernie Bush, who has unwavering support and dedication to his ministry. His priorities of talent, number one, talent identification and development. 2, enhancement and empowerment of youth. 3, awareness and preservation of culture and heritage are priorities which I fully support, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, recognizing the benefits of sports, I look forward to how the ministry will further enhance our community facilities to support our young athletes to meet their full potential. Mr. Speaker, I must also pause here to mention the achievements of East End's own Regan Rutty as the first Caymanian gymnast to represent the Cayman Islands at this year's Tokyo Olympics. Her hard work and the support of her parents allowed her to compete at the highest level, and we are extremely proud that she was our ambassador on the world stage. Other achievements now is our athletes' appearances now in Colombia at the 2021 Junior Pan American Games. We wish them all the best. Mr. Speaker, I've had the good fortune to witness the many activities and achievements that the team in the Ministry of Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage has accomplished since coming into government. The ministry, in conjunction with the Cayman National Cultural Foundation, the National Gallery, and the National Museum, have provided many cultural and heritage programs and projects and showcased various talented Caymanian artists through exhibitions. I recently attended the opening of Ms. Lassie's exhibition, and it served as a reminder of the epitome of Caymanian creativity and cultural expression. It was an absolute honor to be in the presence of the work of one of our national treasures, such as artists like Ms. Lassie, who began painting in her 60s. Also in the exhibit was work by Ms. Virginia Foster. Her exhibit offers a bridge between the past and present and is an encouragement to all. In October, the ministry hosted a cultural event called Caymanian Proud, A Time to Remember. This will be a recurring event where the public can listen to stories of yesteryear and discuss the importance of preserving and safeguarding our Caymanian heritage. Mr. Speaker, just last week when I served as acting minister, I enjoyed an event at the National Museum titled Old Time Days Come Back Again. These events provide an excellent forum for preserving a unique culture for our younger generations to learn. It is through these events, Mr. Speaker, that the ministry upholds its purpose: preserve our past, strengthen our future. Mr. Speaker, a primary goal of this government is the improving the quality of life for all Caymanians and all people who call the Cayman Islands home. I'm turning now to the Ministry of Home Affairs. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Home Affairs strategies and policies demonstrate full support for government priorities and are essential for the continued safety and security of the Cayman Islands. The ministry has remit over 6 critical entities: Department of Public Safety Communications, Cayman Islands Fire Service, Her Majesty's Cayman Islands Prison Service, Department of Community Rehabilitation, Cayman Islands Regiment, and the Cayman Islands Cadet Corps. Mr. Speaker, the responsibility of these key organizations include public safety, national security, the well-being of the community through effective emergency communications, the detention and rehabilitation of offenders, fire and rescue service, provision of disaster relief, security to the country, and youth and leadership development within a disciplined military-looking structure. The effective and efficient delivery of these services are the basis upon which any modern society must function and are fundamental to this government achieving its objectives. Mr. Speaker, achieving the outlined objective for Home Affairs will not be easy given the challenges, particularly in relation to COVID-19 and a reduced budget. I've seen firsthand the dedication of the ministry to serve the Cayman Islands. I take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the entire ministry team for its tireless service to these islands. We know their jobs are not easy, and they often work without the due appreciation, so I pause to acknowledge the tremendous value they add to our society, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, achieving the plan set forth by the ministry will require a collaborative effort with the support of both the private and public sector. We should see individuals and families being restored, reduce criminality, strengthen systems of communication across public safety entities, more efficient and effective emergency responses, a higher capacity to support during and recover from crises and natural disasters, and more equipped recruits for public safety and uniformed services. All of these allow for a thriving society, enhance the Cayman Islands as an ideal tourist attraction, and result in higher quality of life for our people. There are key ways, Mr. Speaker, key ways in which the ministry intends to produce these results, and they include the ministry's people development strategy, its commitment to improve standards, and its prioritization of strategic partnerships. Mr. Speaker, I will first offer my comments on the impressive people development strategy within the ministry. There is clear willingness to invest in developing the knowledge, skills, and leadership capabilities of employees, most of whom are essential workers. This investment allows for more advanced workforce, resulting in quality of work in a critical sector, but also allows for great opportunities for the advancements of Caymanians. The people development strategy spans from intentional efforts to expand the pool and talent of people, of potential of recruits, to clear succession planning for leaders and emerging leaders across the ministry. This is noted through the efforts to endow young cadets and work experience students with opportunities and skills to smoothly transition into public safety careers, thus broadening the base of young, talented Caymanians into fields such as prison, fire, police, Coast Guard, safety communications, and rehabilitation of offenders. Included in the people management strategy across Home Affairs is the concentration on enhancing levels of qualification, specialization, and leadership training within the respective fields. This not only allows for an expansion of meaningful service, Mr. Speaker, but also results in less reliance on an overseas workforce and diversifies careers options for Caymanians across all levels of the civil service, Mr. Speaker. This is highlighted by the Departments of Public Safety Communications' continued training with the most up-to-date technologies. It also includes the Department of Community Rehabilitation's multi-year rollout of the Change Agent Training, the Regiment's specialist training at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, and the Cadets Corps PADI certification, just to name a few examples, Mr. Speaker. Additionally, across the ministry, there has been extensive leadership development with opportunities to act in top leadership positions, participation in the Institute of Leadership and Management Training, and involvement in special projects, among so many others. Mr. Speaker, both the Honorable Minister for Home Affairs and I are fully confident that Acting Chief Officer Michael E. Banks, the Acting Deputy Chief Officers, and the Head of Departments truly demonstrate this in their deliberate actions to enhance recruitment, invest in employees, as well as advocate and care for overall well-being. Mr. Speaker, I urge this government and the public to follow heed of these young leaders in valuing and supporting the men and women of Home Affairs as they seek to execute difficult jobs in trying times. They are the heroes, Mr. Speaker, that are in the face of dangerous circumstances and people working to keep the rest of us safe. They are worth every investment we can afford and deserve our best support in their mission of protecting us. The Ministry's priority of improving operational standards is in terms of increasing effectiveness and enhancing efficiencies. Both are equally important as we are in an era of massive and rapid change. As a government and society, we must keep pace to remain relevant, but do so with clear identity, vision, and a steady strategy. This ministry is unwavering in its determination to enhance public safety services for the benefit of our islands. As a result, their strategic priorities reflect a willingness to change for the better, a concept, Mr. Speaker, that is dear to me. The ways in which the ministry is striving to provide better public services is extensive. There is a clear priority on seeking a review and/or introduce legislation specific to the work of nearly every entity under Home Affairs. This includes reviews of the Prison Act, the Cadet Corps Act, the Alternative Sentencing Act, along with corresponding regulations. It also includes legislation on surveillance devices, the Mental Health Court, and sexual harm prevention orders. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, this ministry's strategic priorities are consistent with upgrading their services to clients directly. A relevant example of this includes the focus on quality assurance, particularly by the Department of Public Service Communications and the Department of Community Rehabilitation to ensure their services are measurable and impactful. Both the prison and DCR are part of a pioneering work group to form an offender management framework, which will ensure there is stronger multi-agency collaboration, supervising high-risk offenders in the community, thereby adding in a layer of protection for the public and victims. This is supported by the work of the Department of Public, This is supported by the work of the Department of Public Service to review its electronic monitoring service to guarantee the technology best meets the need of its partner agencies in monitoring offenders referred to in the program. It also aims to provide the highest level of empowerment and rehabilitative services by both the prison and DCR to break the cycles of criminality and reduce crime. Other planned modes of improving services to clients is through the use of technological advancement, such as the relocation of the National Public Safety Communications Radio Tower and the next generation 911 system. These projects are critical for the increasing capabilities of emergency and first responder communications, inclusive of monitoring radio maritime traffic for the Coast Guard. Mr. Speaker, another project that I have a personal affinity for is the medical alert devices for the elderly and vulnerable persons, which could be life-saving for some of our most precious people. The ministry also plans to build a new prison, improvements to and to rebuilding of outdated fire stations, and procurement of additional vital equipment. I agree with my colleagues that the new prison is essential as the current facility is dangerous to employees and inmates. It is also cost inefficient and distracts from the focus on core mandates of the organizations. The fire service projects are necessary for compliance with international aviation standards and are critical so that domestic and international air travel is not hindered. It would also allow for faster response times, cost saving, and even gender equity in amenities to staff. Equipment for the fire service and regiment also allows for essential work to be done more effectively, such as taller ladders for the fire trucks that can reach higher buildings, and a vehicle fleet for the regiment, which is already proven beneficial in disaster relief and restoring the island to full functionality following storms. Consideration is also given to ensure legacies of sustainability are created, as it is pivotal to this government and the future of our islands. This is highlighted with the prison procuring electric prison escort vehicles and the new prison building being designed with sustainability in mind. Mr. Speaker, as Thomas Edison said, there's a way to do it better. Find it. This ministry wastes no effort in trying to effectively use the resources provided so value for money is demonstrated. This is especially important in the current fiscal environment. Old ways of working are no longer effective and cannot continue. We must be willing to use innovation to work smarter. Mr. Speaker, valuing strategic partnership reminds me of my motto: together, we the people achieve more than any single person could ever do alone. Mr. Speaker, in complex times, working together is critical. Innate to the emergence and high-stakes responsibilities of Home Affairs is the need to work with others to meet public safety needs. This includes partnerships internal to the ministry and across the public and private sector. Examples of these strategic partnerships include the Cadet Corps and the regiment's enormous support to hazard management and the NEOC in various emergency situations, as well as their ongoing support with COVID-19 related programs and projects, which include collaboration with the Public Health Department. Recently, the regiment was recognized for its collaboration with Public Health, Public Works, and with hazard management for the development of a field hospital. Cadet Corps instructors were also honored recently for their role in disaster mitigation. I would personally like to extend my gratitude to them as part of their role in helping to manage quarantine facilities in my constituency of East End. Mr. Speaker, all the agencies must strategically work together to ensure lives and property are protected and rescued. The fire service must also work hand in hand with Civil Aviation Authority, private commercial businesses, and the planning department. Without these, planes cannot land or be refueled, and buildings are not fire safe. Mr. Speaker, our offenders management services and correctional services includes DCR, the prison, and the SPSC, who also work closely with the judicial administration, the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, the Department of Public Prosecution, the Conditional Release Board, the Department of Children and Family Services, the Department of Counseling Services, Health Services Authority, and the Independent Monitoring Board. This work is critical to ensure an effective and fair justice system. Some of these partnerships overlap with and are related to strategic work for safeguarding of victims, children, and other vulnerable persons, Mr. Speaker. However, there are also specific close partnerships related to this work, including the Child Safeguarding Board, the Alliance to End Domestic Violence, and the Cayman Islands Crisis Center. In order to better protect victims, there must be strengthened systems of support based upon close working relationships and information sharing. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the Cadet Corps also has special ties to the Department of Education, various public and private schools, and other youth organizations, as well as the uniformed services. Home Affairs is also grateful for the support it receives from the Governor's Office and the Office of the Deputy Governor, especially in relation to matters of security and various relationships with interlinking boards and committees. There are numerous other statutory and private entities that continue to work strategically with Home Affairs, including the National Drug Council, the Bridge Foundation, Rotary Clubs, private businesses, and various churches. They support our clients who have complex needs, including those who need placement to fulfill their community service orders. Amongst all of these partnerships, Mr. Speaker, We do hope for strengthened relationships with the banks to help with reintegrating people from the prison back into society. It is also noteworthy that Home Affairs has a strong reputation for its volunteer work and community initiatives that extend beyond their ordinary roles. These are special efforts they make to build ties to and in the community. These include numerous projects by the Fire Service and the Prison Service, and the DCR's special role with the chronically mentally unwell, Mr. Speaker. I think we can all agree that the efforts of our unsung Home Affairs heroes to improve community and well-being across these three islands is difficult to match. Mr. Speaker, although it may seem exhaustive to highlight these various partnerships, and it would certainly be impossible to mention them all, I believe it's important to acknowledge the working relationships, because if we are to make a difference, we must value our alliances and continue to strengthen them for the good of the public. Again, Mr. Speaker, I would like to offer my sincere gratitude and thanks to the dedicated staff of both the Ministry of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure, and of Home Affairs, Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage for their dedication to the work and the vision of the ministers and this government. Mr. Speaker, we must all be willing to accomplish more together than divided. This government and these ministries alone cannot achieve the outcomes we are striving for. We need collaboration of the country as well. Before I close, Mr. Speaker, I want to state that despite the challenges we are currently facing as a result of COVID-19, I am optimistic about the future of these islands. I'm optimistic that the programs and initiatives that this government will complete over the next fiscal year will make these islands grow and its residents grow stronger and more resilient. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank the Deputy Premier and the Minister of Finance for his hard work he and his team did to bring the budget to Parliament, which is compliant with the Public Management and Finance Act and the framework for fiscal responsibility. This budget puts the people of the Cayman Islands first, and this government looks forward to the support of the House to vote for a budget that invests in our people. Mr. Speaker, I end with a quote by Helen Keller: "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may God continue to bless these wonderful, beautiful Cayman Islands.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The elected member from Savannah. Elected member from Savannah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise with a great sense of fulfillment in this honorable House today to provide my contribution to the 2022-2023 budget policy statement delivered by the Honorable Premier. I also wish to thank His Excellency the Governor for his throne speech and his recognition of the dedication this government has put forward in steering the good ship Cayman through troubled and uncharted waters. I am proud to affirm my support for this government and for the incredible work we're doing every day to make the lives of all Caymanians better. Mr. Speaker, I wish to also take this opportunity to say how much I appreciate the long hours the Deputy Premier and Minister of Finance and his team have spent ensuring a budget that has been presented to this honorable House is without taxes levied on our people. I was delighted to be a part of this progress. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Premier assigned me to two different ministries, namely the Ministry of Tourism and Transport and the Ministry of Investment, Innovation and Social Development. I will speak briefly on the topics that pertain to these two ministries, starting first with the duties assigned to me under the Ministry of Tourism. Mr. Speaker, anyone who knows anything about me at all will know that I am passionate about my people, particularly about taking care of the elderly. With that said, having lived in Savannah Newlands all my life, I also have been an advocate for taking care of our environment for as long as I can remember. But I don't just talk the talk, as the saying goes. Rather, Mr. Speaker, I have worked diligently for many decades to enhance my community and work with the residents to keep our communities clean. Over the years, I have led many neighborhood cleanups and spearheaded various beautification projects in an effort to maintain the environment that we live in. The phrase, "community builds country," is not just a catchy slogan, Mr. Speaker. It encapsulates a sentiment that I truly believe in and hold dear. 7 months ago on the campaign trail, I promised that if I was given the opportunity to be elected, I would seek to expand my efforts beyond the boundaries of Savannah Newlands and work on a national level to enhance and beautify all communities across all of our islands. Mr. Speaker, I therefore cannot adequately put into words how grateful and excited I am to have received the support and blessings from my colleagues in caucus and cabinet to pursue this objective on a national scale. The Cayman Islands has a global reputation for outstanding natural beauty and a well-maintained environment. We market our panoramic views to visitors and use it as a picturesque backdrop to enhance our world-class tourism product. But if we look a little closer, there are still so many areas that sadly do not live up to the mark. With the reopening of our borders and the onset of Christmas, it is timely that effort is made to beautify our surroundings, but not just for the sake of tourism, but rather for the pleasure and enjoyment of everyone, visitors and residents, young and old alike. Caymanians are known the world over for being warm, caring, beautiful people, and these attributes should be reflected throughout our homeland. The Minister of Tourism has generously allocated the sum of $250,000 per year to be used in creative and innovative ways to beautify our islands and ensure we welcome visitors back to Cayman with pride. And with our stunning natural scenery showcased without litter and derelict vehicles spoiling the view. To this end, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Tourism has reestablished the Cayman Islands Beautification Committee. I am very pleased to report that Mrs. Karen Hides, or KK as we are familiar with her, has been appointed as the chairperson, with Mr. Robert Bawden serving as deputy chairperson. Other members on the committee include Ms. Marjorie Revy, Mr. Edney McLean, Mrs. Feliciana E. Banks, Ms. Omiria Gordon, Ms. Nikia Esteban. To ensure the committee is as inclusive as possible, every district across Grand Cayman, as well as the sister islands, are represented, making this a truly national initiative. And I'd just like to say that subcommittees will be set up under each one of these persons that was just named. The committee will report to the Ministry of Tourism and will work closely with a cross-section of government agencies. Consequently, ex officio members include representatives from the Department of Environmental Health, the Department of Commerce and Investment, the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, and the Chief Officer in the Ministry of Tourism. The committee will be guided by precise terms of reference with the goals to enhance the island's aesthetic appeal in every way possible, including through the use of indigenous flora where appropriate. Mr. Speaker, my intention is to go further than just having the average cleanup in our neighborhoods. I would like to see a national policy put in place for how we present ourselves at our businesses, workplaces, and through our public transport on buses and taxis. By way of example, our airports are where travelers receive their first impressions. I believe we should have the welcome mat extended to welcome those visitors who arrive here as our guests. Taxis and buses should be in mint condition when they pick up passengers. This says a lot about how passengers are transported. A clean and fresh ride makes our guests look forward to their vacation spot. A well-received arrival gives the visitor a reason to return. Just like when guests are invited to our homes, we make sure the place is tidy and looks good. This same kind of care and attention should also be given to visitors to ensure we make a good impression. This will encourage them to have only good things to say about the Cayman Islands when they speak about their time here. Beyond cleanups and improving the aesthetics of our roads and beaches, I would like the committee to focus on providing their recommendations to address our island's litter problems, which frankly, Mr. Speaker, has gotten out of hand. Some of the enhancements I envision may entail amendments to legislation, as I would like to see stricter anti-littering laws with substantial fines far exceeding the current 500. In this PAC government, it is our intention to enforce the litter laws and eventually hire environment wardens to ensure those laws, to enforce those laws. Mr. Speaker, these islands must get back to the original way of how people used to take pride in their surroundings. I can attest that during my father's time on this earth, it was a daily battle for him to keep our islands clean. He was a stickler for a litter-free country. He had signs made at one point in time that said, "I am your country. Please don't litter my shoulders." I presume his legacy lives on in me. People who live and work here must realize that it is a land of laws. They must comply and ensure where they live is clean and pristine. I wish to take this opportunity to send a huge thank you out to the Department of Environmental Health and all the sanitation workers who collect our garbage. Mr. Speaker, I fight for them every day because they are essential and don't have an easy job. When garbage is set out, it must be properly disposed of in proper bags and placed in proper bins. That way, animals don't have an opportunity to scatter the trash. Sanitation workers are humans, and they need us to work with them. We must do better, and the only way to enforce this is by enforcing the laws. Mr. Speaker, I wish to take this opportunity and mention the recent bulk waste cleanup. And I know for sure that Mr. Sims and Mr. Dawes did an excellent job in making this happen. Their workers were out there day and night, at times having to return to the spot where the debris was offloaded 2 to 3 times. I know it was an easy task, but I just wish to send out my grateful and thankful gratitude towards what they do on a daily basis to keep this island clean. Aside from being an eyesore, abandoned vehicles are often utilized to store garbage and other refuge, which then attract pests and become breeding grounds for disease. From time to time, rusted out cars have even become targets of arson and vandalism. So if you have derelict vehicles sitting around, please have them removed. This is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker, especially for an island that relies on tourism. the main pillar of the economy. As we approach the holidays and the government-sponsored NICE program gets underway, a concerted effort will be made for roadside cleanups to go beyond the main highways and make sure that we also leave our beaches and public areas free of trash. Alongside the Beautification Committee, I will spare no effort in my quest to make Cayman as attractive as possible. But there's only so much the committee can do, and it starts with us, Mr. Speaker. Each and every person who calls these islands home has a part to play and can start by taking ownership of their own surroundings, beginning with their homes and yard spaces. If there's vacant land adjacent to your yards or down the street, take a look at that too and report derelict vehicles that need removing, or the unlicensed roadside garages that are popping up in residential communities without any regard for the law. I challenge the general public, the private sector, and especially our youth to join in this national initiative to keep our beautiful islands clean. There are times in life when everyone needs to come together to lend a hand for the greater good, and this is one of those times, Mr. Speaker. With that said, I would like to recognize the many organizations and volunteers who regularly organize district cleanups, and I thank them for their commitment to keeping Cayman clean. I also look forward to including them in our ongoing efforts to maintaining and preserving our island's pristine beauty. Mr. Speaker, as well as having oversight of the National Beautification Initiative, I will also have more involvement with Pedro St. James Castle, the birthplace of democracy in the Cayman Islands, a place near and dear to my heart. The passage of Tropical Storm Grace in August caused severe damage to the vegetation and trees on the grounds of Pedro St. James. I am pleased to report that a generous donation of plants have been received to replace those that were lost. They have all been replanted and are located in high-traffic areas which were in need of beautifying. I wish to take this opportunity to publicly thank the person for this generous donation. I'm really pleased with all that I see happening at Pedro under the very capable stewardship of the director, Mr. Patrick Thompson. Another aspect of my work at the Ministry of Tourism also entails beauty, but of a different nature. That is, in my role as the ministry's representative on the Miss Cayman Islands Universe Committee. The ministry has held the franchise for the pageant for over 2 decades, and in that time has helped dozens of young Caymanian women realize their dreams of becoming our island's most recognized tourism ambassador. Throughout the years, the pageant has been run and organized by a committee made up of dedicated volunteers who devote countless hours doing whatever it takes, whether over weekends, weekdays, or holidays, to support and advance this national event. In the eyes of the public, the Miss Cayman Islands Universe pageant is an annual event that we come out to and enjoy to crown our new island queen. But long after the curtains come down and the stage lights go out, the work of the committee continues throughout the year. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, our reigning queen, Georgina Kerford, is in Israel, preparing to take part in the Miss Universe pageant on December the 12th. I know I speak for all of us in this honorable house today in wishing her every success as she represents our beloved Cayman Islands on the global stage. I know firsthand the level of dedication and commitment that it takes to run the Miss Cayman Islands Universe Committee and pageant, having volunteered my services for the past 25 years. I was more than pleasantly surprised, in fact overjoyed, by the Minister of Tourism's announcement that he would be seeking to add a paid permanent position to assist the Miss Cayman Islands Committee. The Minister also confirmed his intention to increase the level of funding provided to the committee, and I know this awesome gesture will also be well received. With respect to my constituency of Savannah, one of the biggest time-wasting and annoying issues affecting the constituents is the traffic congestion they endure on a daily basis. I too can attest to the bumper-to-bumper crawl that occurs during peak hours, as I head to town in the mornings and return at the end of the day. I am therefore supportive of the government's policy decision regarding the continuation of the East-West Arterial Road extension. I look forward to working closely with both the Minister of Tourism and the Minister with responsibility for roads to ensure that the good people of Savannah, Newlands, and the outer districts get the benefit of easier traffic flows through our new road system. While road works continue, Mr. Speaker, I'm gravely concerned about road safety. Mr. Speaker, I have seen so much lawlessness and recklessness on our streets lately. Drivers are not practicing road safety. It is as if drivers don't value life. The speed at which I see drivers on our roads traveling at is cause for major concern. They speed without realizing their speed limits. Again, Mr. Speaker, let me remind those who take those chances, they are breaking the law. On a regular basis, I watch with bated breath the speed some drivers take driving through the school zones. Flashing yellow lights are provided, Mr. Speaker, that for them to indicate that they should drive with caution, but many don't ever give a thought to the lives of those students. Buses pull out from school zones, yet drivers ignore the precious lives on those buses. Will it take a serious accident for change to happen? I'm delighted to see that the Purple Ribbon program will once again be used during the holiday season. I hope this will help to keep our streets just a little bit safer. I take this opportunity to give thanks and appreciation to our Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. These officers have a huge undertaking protecting and keeping us safe. They are appreciated. Mr. Speaker, the Joanna Clark Primary School looks forward to the construction of a community hall, which is much needed. This hall will not only provide an area for the students to participate in activities, but it will also serve as a hurricane shelter for the community. I also wish to thank the Minister of Education for providing free lunches for our children. Students are being given the opportunity to receive a nutritious meal. Education is and will always remain a top priority for me. In the past 7 months, I know for certain there hasn't been a day that I have not been out there for my people. I got back into politics for the same reason as the Honorable Premier, to give people hope. As two homegrown representatives, the community of Savannah Newlands are in safe hands. In the next few months, Savannah Newlands will see a huge transformation, and I say, stay tuned. I too grew up in the day and age where it was a village that raised a child, and I'm proud to say that my parents taught us values and morals and taught us what hard work is all about. That is part of what drove me to seek re-election and become a full-time representative for the Savannah community, which I hold near and dear to my heart. In this community, the Honorable Premier and I are happy to be able to provide a full-time community office that provides the services to our people Monday through Friday. Having such a facility with dedicated staff, we are able to accommodate our constituents even when we are sitting here in Parliament. While we may not be there every day, we're here in this honorable house building a foundation for future generations of Cayman and taking care of our people, many times until the wee hours of the night. Mr. Speaker, the past few months, our office has been utilized as a vaccination clinic, which came as a great benefit to the people of the Eastern Districts. It is widely utilized for persons getting the first dose, second dose, and even the booster. Mr. Speaker, this would not have been possible without the caring staff of HSA and Public Health. The time they spend with each person with gentle hands make the experience more comfortable. I sincerely thank them, Mr. Speaker, for all that they do. Mr. Speaker, in July of this year, the island's national insurance company, Cineco, opened a new branch at the Country Corner Shopping Center in Savannah. The office is a convenient out-of-town location for persons who reside in the eastern districts of Grand Cayman and allows business transactions to be conducted during business hours without clients, contributing to the already unbearable traffic congestion. Given the level of convenience provided by this new Cineco office, I would like to introduce a pilot program to establish a needs assessment unit, NAU, office in the area as well. There are a number of other initiatives that this government would like to put in place to benefit the residents in the Bodden Towns, Newlands, and Savannah areas and beyond. Mr. Speaker, my other ministry, the Ministry of Social Development, is also near and dear to my heart, especially because it touches our seniors. The ministry is home to the Department of Children and Family Services and the Needs Assessment Unit. In their respective role as partnering entities, Mr. Speaker, they both play an integral part or role in strengthening support system to ensure the well-being of vulnerable members of our society, namely children and youth, adults and older persons, including the provision of appropriate social services and welfare support, recognition of family and social support to maintain quality lives and recognition of opportunities for autonomy and self-actualization. Mr. Speaker, DCFS protects and promotes the rights and welfare of children and families through the provision of social work, intervention, public education, advocacy, and community-based programs, foster care and adoption services, and the placement of vulnerable children and older persons in residential facilities. The NAU assists members of the society who are unable to support their families or themselves financially due to disability, unemployment, and other impacting financial challenges. Jointly, Mr. Speaker, both of these entities take into account what is right, fair, just, or good, identifies what ought to be done and what is most acceptable in the delivery of best social work practices. They respond to the social, cultural, physical, and global changes in the environment that have an impact on the vulnerable members of the society and engage in approaches to bridge any existing gap in meeting the needs of vulnerable persons in our society. Much is in the works for the betterment of those who fall into this category. Mr. Speaker, I cannot get up here and speak in this honorable House without mentioning the seniors in our community. Senior citizens are placed at the forefront of one's thought at this time of year. The past year and a half has been extremely challenging for many of them. Many have been stuck in their homes, unable to go out like they used to. COVID has definitely cramped many of their styles. We need to make every effort to keep in touch with them. Many are familiar using a cell phone with ease. They're able to text and WhatsApp. So I'm asking everyone to keep in touch with our seniors, make them feel loved by checking in with them regularly. I wish to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, and just thank the management and staff of DCFS for all that they do with our aging population. It was an honor to participate and represent the Minister of Social Development during the month of October, which recognized our elderly. Many events were held that gave our seniors an opportunity to mingle and see friends and family despite COVID. It was refreshing to see the joy and happiness on their faces and be out in the open, fresh air after being cooped up for so long. Mr. Speaker, as we enter the Christmas season, let us make every effort to ensure that their Christmas is bright and that lots of love and attention is placed on them. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister, elected member of West Bay South, is tasked with many programs to allow our seniors a better quality of life, and it is my intention to be by his side during this duration. Senior citizens, much is being done with you in mind to make your life easier and more comfortable. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Honourable Minister for Tourism and Transport and the Minister for Investment, Innovation and Social Development for the invaluable support, assistance and guidance they have provided to me since I became a part of their respective ministries. I have so much respect and admiration for these two young men. It is my honor to work side by side with each of them. I also wish to extend sincere thanks to the chief officers and the talented and experienced civil servants who work hard and do their best every day to support all of the elected representatives as we endeavor to improve the quality of life for all who call these islands home. To my constituents, you're always on my mind. Thanks to Debbie and Leanne for managing the office in her absence. Thanks to my PA, Angela, who wears her heart on her sleeve. Their support and dedication to our constituents is most appreciated. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to share a quote from Charles Steeles entitled, "Faith." I believe in today. It is all that I possess. The past is of value only as it can make the life of today fuller and freer. There is no assurance of tomorrow. I must make good today. Mr. Speaker, it is a long, hard road ahead, but we must have faith that we will get there. May we always remember that it takes a village, and we are all in this together. I thank you, and may God continue to bless these beautiful Cayman Islands.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The honourable member from West Bay Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand today humbled to represent the people of West Bay Central, to speak on a budget that has frequently been referred to as a people's budget, and that is what it is, Mr. Speaker. Before I offer my contribution, I would first like to thank God for affording me this opportunity to stand in this honorable house to be the voice for the people of West Bay Central. I would also like to thank my husband, Michael, and my children for their unwavering support. My husband has made many sacrifices so that I could pursue this calling, and for that I'm grateful. I would also like to thank my siblings for their support, and to my parents, Austin and Mary Ebanks, not only for supporting me and encouraging me, but for teaching me many valuable lessons that I view as critical components to leadership. Mr. Speaker, I've been taught by good people who believe in treating others the way that you want to be treated, offering a lending hand when you're in a position to do so, never thinking of what you might be losing, because in the end, you're always blessed with more than you set out with in the beginning. These life skills are critical in my role as a representative for my people, and I want to publicly thank my parents for all that they have taught me. I may be new at this, Mr. Speaker, but thanks to my parents, West Bay Central has a representative that will always lead with compassion and humility. I also want to just take a few moments to thank my committee, who all worked diligently leading up to the election and whose support I will always appreciate and always crave. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the small but mighty team at my constituency office. My Tropical Storm Grace cleanup crew, which has now birthed into the West Bay Central Dignity Project. These men and women have been cleaning up our community, and last but not least, to my predecessor, Captain Eugene Ebanks, who spent a large portion of his life serving his country and his constituency. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank all the residents of West Bay Central who decided to take a chance this past April with electing me. I know that the first 7 months have been very busy working with my colleagues, where we have been meeting very frequently at the Government Admin Building and the House of Parliament. We've been mapping out reopening and more recently the budget. Now that we have these two very important and time-consuming tasks out of the way, I am excited to start rolling out the benefits of this budget to my people in West Bay Central. Mr. Speaker, when the lineup of ministers hit the news on the first week post-election, many people were excited to see that the member for West Bay Central was going to hold a seat in cabinet. I too, Mr. Speaker, was excited as a woman from West Bay to hold a cabinet seat and to have all 3 members from West Bay in cabinet, save for you, who would be holding the seat as Speaker of the House. But Mr. Speaker, as time progressed on, what seemed like one of the longest weeks ever, our intention all along was to have a true representation of independents and PPM members. It was our goal to have an independent-led coalition government. When the news broke that we might be able to strike the interests of the member from Cayman Brac East, I was more than happy to accommodate her by giving up my seat, knowing that another female would be in cabinet and that we all could benefit from her experience. And that we have, Mr. Speaker. Today, I am proud to stand as the Parliamentary Secretary for Education to give my contribution to this important subject area. Mr. Speaker, I've always been passionate about educating our young people, as I know that a strong educational background provides the foundation for future success. This passion for education has only deepened since being elected earlier this year. I'm proud to be a part of this government that has chosen to prioritize education. The strategic policy statement has education listed as the very first broad outcome. It is at the top of our agenda, improving education to promote lifelong learning and greater economic mobility. As Parliamentary Secretary for Education, I'm supporting the Honourable Minister in bringing about improvements to the education system as a whole and by extension to the community. Mr. Speaker, as I spend a considerable amount of time in my community, and as a result, I have the opportunity to hear firsthand feedback from parents, guardians, and even students. This feedback is often positive, and persons share ideas for improvements and needs within the educational system. Feedback is important as we want to ensure that we are meeting the needs of our students and our community. Many of these initiatives, Mr. Speaker, set out in our SPS, I believe, are critical for our students' success. In August 2021, the Honourable Minister announced the provision of breakfast, lunch and snacks for all children enrolled in the government primary schools and the Lighthouse School. Whilst the member for Georgetown South has raised that she does not support the universal approach at a time like this, when everyone is hurting, when NAU is inundated with work, being hungry should not mean being stuck with a stigma. And Mr. Speaker, we are serving the people within the present needs. I'm pleased to report that this program has had resounding success in the 3 months since its implementation. On Monday to Friday, each week, students are provided with tasty and nutritious meals, the provision of which undoubtedly will positively impact their physical, cognitive, and behavioral development. Just yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I was guided to a quote made by Trevor Noah, and I quote, "People love to say, 'Give a man a fish, and he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, and he'll eat for a lifetime.' What they don't say is, 'And it would be nice if you would give him a fishing rod,'" end quote. That is what these meals are, Mr. Speaker. These meals have become a lifeline to many children and families as they help ease the financial burden and uncertainty brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. I was particularly heartened to learn that primary school students were still able to access the meals that they needed while in lockdown. Mr. Speaker, please permit me to thank the Minister of Education, her team, and the Department of Educational Services for implementing the necessary measures to ensure that students' nutritional needs are met, thus ensuring the continuity of learning. This was my first confirmation that continuity was and will be going forward critical to the success of the Ministry of Education. For I too campaigned on providing free breakfast for the children, and I was elated to have discovered that this was a policy that was already written and ready to be rolled out. My contribution was merely to support making this policy a priority for this budget. This, Mr. Speaker, is why I'm so happy that the Honourable Minister was able to maintain her seat in this ministry. Ms. Juliana is working with a government who supports her, and I commend her former colleagues for always giving her praises. But when I look at all that this woman has done to prepare her children, as she calls them, I can only imagine what the minister would have accomplished if she had this government to support her from 4 years ago. Many of the policies that she has worked on would have been fully implemented long time. To my people, I assure you that appointing Ms. Juliana to Mother Education was the right decision. Now back to the school meals, Mr. Speaker. We rolled out the meals in a phased approach due to budget constraints, and I look forward to the introduction of the next phase of this program in our secondary schools, which is scheduled to begin early 2022, so that all of our children will have the necessary support they need to optimize the opportunity to learn. Speaking of optimizing learning opportunities, Mr. Speaker, I'm quite pleased that this budget supports the Education Ministry's move to place additional assistant teachers in our public schools. These individuals will undoubtedly provide well-needed support to more of our classroom teachers as they apply teaching and learning strategies to help students, particularly those with special educational needs, and enabling all students to realize their full potential. While there have been arguments against the effectiveness of teaching assistants in some quarters, evidence from a randomized trial conducted in Denmark back in 2018, it confirmed that assistant teachers had positive impacts on students' test scores, and these effects are persistent over time for disadvantaged students. Findings for the trial further suggested that assistant teachers are not just for class size reduction, but are particularly impactful when sharing instructional responsibility for the classroom. Mr. Speaker, I'm truly grateful to be a part of a government and a ministry that acknowledges that building a stronger, integrated education foundation is fundamental to our development and growth as a nation. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to highlight the importance of mental health for persons in our community, but especially for our students. The Cayman Islands and the rest of the world are managing the prevalence of COVID-19, and our students are a part of this process. The mental health and wellness of our students is a key area of focus included in the strategic policy statement. In September of this year, the Ministry of Education issued guidance related to COVID-19 for educational institutions. This guidance was important in promoting the health and safety of our students and staff. In addition to physical safety, the need to ensure mental health is also critical. Counselors and specialist staff have been focused on students' overall health as they balance their schoolwork and the new normal of the COVID-19 in our community. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to pause and thank you, sir, for being a champion for the needy. I have enjoyed recently meeting with you to map out a plan to provide an after-school support to the children in West Bay. It has been nice to meet with you and more recently, Reverend Mary Graham, to determine how we could roll out this after-school program. In short order, all 4 members from West Bay will have the opportunity to partner with Reverend Mary Graham to provide an after-school program, which she has already implemented in the Georgetown district. Mr. Speaker, while this budget does not have any allocation to support this program, we as West Bay MPs will chart the course and look to partner with private sector, and we intend to build on this in order for this to be a national initiative by the next budget period. I want to commend our students for being very responsible throughout this pandemic. They have followed the guidelines and worked together to promote safety measures within the schools. As we educate our students, it is also essential for us to provide them with a safe and harmonious school environment, free from bullying and other negative behaviors. The act of bullying can have a dire effect on children or young people's physical, emotional, social, and even psychological health, the effects of which are frequently carried over into adulthood. The National Anti-Bullying Policy for School Students was approved in late 2020. It sets out the school's responsibilities to counter bullying, establish consistent expectations, and promote an understanding of all bullying-related issues. Our public schools and several independent schools have since used this document as the basis for their internal anti-bullying policies. But I also look forward, Mr. Speaker, to working with the Minister to put forward the supporting anti-bullying legislation early in the new year. This legislation is needed because it sets out a reporting mechanism. Mr. Speaker, another area of education that I'm excited about is the introduction of more science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, often known recently as STEAM. We know that the technology sector is growing, and students, now more than ever, are technology savvy. It is critical that educators are equipped to help students promote this technological knowledge and are able to successfully integrate technology into learning. We have seen our high school students involved in a robotics program. They have won several regional and international prizes. This is a starting point. It is excellent preparation for careers that involve STEAM. I am confident that we will see our students as future doctors, for example, utilizing robotics to conduct surgeries and other medical interventions. Mr. Speaker, the increase in government scholarships will also assist students in having sufficient funding to access university-level programs that focus on STEAM-type careers and allow students to expand on the education foundation that they would have received here in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, I'm also very excited about enhancements being planned for technical, vocational education and training. our public high schools already include a number of TVET courses for students as options for study. These are to be expanded and additional courses are to be offered at CIFET. There are also a number of educational institutions offering TVET programs to the general community. Mr. Speaker, these opportunities are critical as there is a need for skilled and competent individuals in TVET careers. We all know that these careers can be very lucrative, and it is encouraging to see students enrolled and doing well in these courses. Speaking of TVET training, I would like to state publicly that this is an area that I am excited to focus on during this term. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that TVET is one of the key pillars to building our middle class, and it is now time to implement a national TVET framework, which I would love to champion. And I'm very pleased to have been given the Minister's blessing, and I look forward to placing an emphasis in this area. With my passion for TVET, I am pleased to see where a cross-ministry approach has already begun for a pilot program with the Public Works Department. Mr. Speaker, when I say cross-ministry, I'm not referring to sharing of financial allocations at this time, but human capital. And as the PS for Education, I'm happy to have been asked by the Minister of Planning and Infrastructure to assist with developing a program that will cater to the more mature students. I'm pleased to work alongside the Minister of Planning, along with Mr. Troy Worms, Mr. Andy Francis, and Mr. Michael Miles from Inspire Cayman on a project that has the potential of making a huge impact on our Caymanian people. Mr. Speaker, there is a need in every organization to enhance the job performance of the employees. The implementation of training and development are one of the major steps that most companies need to enhance employee performance. With organizations having better trained and developed employees, organizations are then able to afford wasteful spending and improved performance. I'm pleased that this budget will provide this pilot TVET program to be offered to older applicants. The proposed project is to support the development of human capital by way of quality, technical, and vocational training necessary to support economic growth. This will be achieved by strengthening and building on an already existing institutional capacity at the PWD Apprentice Training Program. Mr. Speaker, in recent times, the scarcity of applicants with the requisite skills to effectively perform key specialized roles, in particular within the public work departments, and by extension the wider civil service, has become a cause for concern. Considering the current industry climate and the trend of important skilled, I'll just repeat that to be clear, and the trend of importing skilled, low-wage construction workers, a more direct approach to the development of local human capital is required. The program will have 3 central goals, namely to create a medium which young Caymanians may develop specialized skills, 2, providing gainful employment, permit PWD and the wider civil service to identify, mold, and retain talent to ensure sustainability and business continuity, and finally to help destigmatize TVET and advance it in the driver for economic growth, human capacity development, and nation building. Mr. Speaker, there is a current need in the Department of Planning to recruit and train staff to ensure the department continues to deliver world-class services with trained, certified personnel. And this program will be able to afford the planning department with the expertise that it's required. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, on a constituency or district level, I'm also looking forward to partnering with Inspire Cayman, and I'll be rolling out a TVET training program hosted right in West Bay. This will provide my people in West Bay Central and the entire district an opportunity to have better opportunities to compete in the workforce. I'm proud to be on the government side that has all of West Bay fully represented. This means that district initiatives such as the TVET training program, will benefit the entire district. As our budget has been constrained due to COVID allocations, this initiative, again, will initially be done from a constituency level and partnership with private sector. However, it is definitely going to be an area that I intend to grow along with my colleagues to take to a national level. Mr. Speaker, I'm also looking forward to the further success of the education sector in the coming years. I plan to work closely with all of our schools, and in particular, the Sir John A. Cumber Primary School, as we collaborate to bring about the best outcomes for our children. Turning now, Mr. Speaker, to the Ministry of Financial Services and Commerce, I would like to thank the Honourable Minister for Financial Services for inviting me to speak as the Parliamentary Secretary. And he's tasked me with speaking on the SAGC's budget proposals for this budget period. In outlining their challenges and opportunities for the next 2 years, I will also update this Honourable Parliament and the public about the SAGC's recent contributions to our economic stability. Like the core ministry and its entities, they all have a good story to tell, as evidenced by the fact that a number of them are self-funded, highly respected internationally by their peers, or both. Mr. Speaker, the 5 SAGCs under the ministry are the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, Cayman Islands Stock Exchange, Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands, and the Civil Aviation Authority of the Cayman Islands, and lastly, the Auditors Oversight Authority. And I'll start with the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority. Since its inception nearly 25 years ago, CIMA has become a major gatekeeper in the financial services industry, as it provides responsible oversight of banking, corporate services, insurance, investments, fund management, and trusts. Its comprehensive legal framework and regulatory systems, along with their rapport with the ministry and working relationship with industry, greatly supports Cayman's adaptability to evolving international standards and a reputation as a preferred international financial center. Under its current strategic plan for this budget period, CIMA is reviewing its operational structure to best manage its growing supervisory responsibilities. It is improving its internal operational efficiencies, including automating manual processes to allow human resources to be allocated to higher risk areas of supervision. It is also strengthening capacity and capabilities and enhancing stakeholder engagement practices. These actions support CIMA's fulfillment of international standards, which over the past 2 to 3 years have expanded to require an increased focus on AML supervision of CIMA-regulated entities, increased oversight of registered persons under the Securities Investment Business Act, implementation of an administrative fines regime, and supervising of virtual asset services providers. Considering this activity, Mr. Speaker, CIMA would benefit from increased human and technological resources from government. AML supervision. Speaking to AML supervision, CIMA recently has enhanced its risk-based supervision framework, deployed a risk assessment tool, and increased its on-site inspections, established a separate division for AML supervision, which is now staffed with 27 employees. However, the division needs at least 15 to 20 additional staff to fully manage on-site inspections, rather than outsourcing them, and to supervise CIBA RPs. Mr. Speaker, CIMA's Securities Supervision Division, which is responsible for the prudent supervision of RPs, also needs resources. CIMA also urgently needs at least 4 to 6 additional lawyers to implement administrative fines, which includes managing judicial review and related litigation matters. Because the administrative fines process is quite involved, it requires experts with the utmost technical and legal accuracy. At least 7 staff are needed to develop and issue regulatory measures and update internal operational processes for virtual assets service providers. The Cayman Islands Civil Service Credit Union, Crisis Management, CIBA licensees, and to comply with Group of International Financial Center Supervisors' recommendations, as well as the Basel III standards. Staff are also needed in IT, HR, and finance. Mr. Speaker, one of the top 5 risks identified in CIMA's internal risk register is failure and/or inability to retain or attract sufficient members of skilled and competent employees in a timely manner. Indicative of this is the fact that most of the support teams, and this is non-supervisory divisions, have not grown over the past few years, yet they are supporting a team that has doubled in staff. This poses a significant risk for CIMA. Its recruitment efforts are primarily challenged by the lack of qualified and specialist candidates locally and the work permit requirement for recruiting overseas candidates. Mr. Speaker, attractive salaries, employee benefits, and more reasonable workloads offered by the private sector are another challenge for CIMA. As CIMA endeavors to employ staff, experienced and qualified staff, the turnover is rising. These challenges were amplified during the COVID-19 pandemic and also more recently here in 2021. Mr. Speaker, similar to its human resource needs, another of CIMA's top 5 risks is inadequate adoption for new items or utilization for existing items of technological tools and platforms result in excessive time spent on manual processes of data and duties. And another risk, the authority fails to keep pace with industry innovation and trends, products and services, and changes made to domestic and international laws, regulations, or standards, and subsequently fails to meet or adopt applicable changes to Cayman's regulatory framework. Mr. Speaker, technological resources and expertise would allow CIMA to address these risks and, as a result, allow them to better manage their human resources in efficiently supervising their regulated sectors. They therefore ask that government consider providing additional support. That said, Mr. Speaker, temporarily setting aside the HR challenges, CIMA's continued good work is based in teamwork, investing in professional and personal development, a family-oriented working environment, and a strong leadership support structure to which the Managing Director, Ms. Cindy Scotland, must be highlighted and commended for her passion to the cause over her long tenure. Mr. Speaker, moving on to the Cayman Islands Stock Exchange, which has been a specialist exchange for sophisticated products with a focus on being an efficient gateway to global markets. The broad array of companies that access the exchange include global financial institutions, emerging technology and life sciences companies, and some of the world's most successful hedge funds. The stock exchange currently lists more than 6,500 securities and maintains a market of more than $645 billion US. The benefits from listing on the Cayman Islands Stock Exchange include its flexibility, efficiency, and competitive fee structure, which attracts international issuers, and its long-standing international recognition as a listing center for investment funds and debt securities. On this point, Mr. Speaker, the stock exchange is recognized by the UK government by way Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs Agency and under the UK Income Tax Act 2007. It's a member of the International Organization of Securities Commission, the global standard setter for securities regulation. It's registered as an affiliate member of the World Federation of Exchanges and the Stock Exchange of Jamaica. And the Cayman Stock Exchange and the Jamaican Stock Exchange recognize each other on a reciprocal basis, which allows Cayman to better capitalize on CARICOM market opportunities. Another benefit, Mr. Speaker, is that the stock exchange disclosure and continuing obligations are easier to comply with than certain other stock exchanges, while it remains well regulated by the Stock Exchange Authority. The stock exchange objectives are to protect investors and the public interest and prevent unfair discrimination between customers, issuers, or broker members. Ensure that broker members deal honestly and fairly with investors and have sound finances and management. Ensure that business is conducted in an orderly manner to afford proper protection to investors. Ensure that broker members are effectively monitored for compliance with enforcement actions taken as needed, and to promote and maintain high standards of integrity and fair dealing in the business transactions made by broker members. Stock exchange listings increase year over year. In particular, it has seen strong growth in securitization listings, such as aircraft financing transactions. It also retains its position as a leading offshore listing venue for bonds and other debt securities involving the leading financial services firms, and for listing CLOs, or also known as collateralized loan obligations. As a non-EU exchange, the stock exchange continues to be highly regarded as a practical, efficient exchange for CLO listings, where investors do not require a European nexus. Overall, the stock exchange continues to see increasing market capitalization based on strong listing volumes of debt securities, which finance private equity-backed transactions and the refinancing of CLO structures. Mr. Speaker, the stock exchange has implemented new HR and payroll software, improved the capacity to accommodate increased traffic to its website, upgraded its IT security to safeguard public-facing websites from cyber attacks, and become digitalized, paperless environment. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, the stock exchange financial performance continues to be very strong based on deliberate efforts to increase revenues and control expenditure. Mr. Speaker, the people of the Cayman Islands have had a long and intricate relationship with the sea. And I'm now going to discuss the SAGC the Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands. And this long, intricate relationship was indeed things maritime that supplied the foundation on which our society was built. It is little wonder, therefore, that he hath founded it upon the seas forms part of our coat of arms. It was the sea that sustained us from the days of the fishermen and the turtlers and boat builders to the international seafarer and now tourism in the more recent years. And I'm so proud and honored to be a champion from a national level to build a broader maritime sector. If only my late grandfather, Harvey Ebanks, who was a turtler, went to Mosquito Key and also sailed with the national bulk carriers, a man who fought sharks to bring home turtles. For him to see me here in this honorable house delivering this message about building a new industry, a maritime industry. And although he's not here to watch me today, I'm so proud that another sailorman in my life, my dad, who also served this country at sea with the national bulk carriers, whose love for his wife and his children is deeper than the ocean, can watch me today as I speak about an area that I am passionate about because he raised me on the ocean, and I am proud to be a saltwater baby. I thank my dad for teaching me how to appreciate the beauty of our waters, and because of that appreciation, I can say that the minister, Andre Ebanks, has tasked me with a role that I am very proud to focus on. Mr. Speaker, we seem to have taken things maritime for granted. It is probably because of this intricate relationship that successive governments have not taken a national and more holistic approach to the development of the broader maritime sector. Chartering a new national level approach, however, does not mean discarding things from our rich maritime past. Indeed, it would build on these very traditions. Mr. Speaker, it does, however, require a much broader approach, an approach that the Ministry of Financial Services and Commerce plans to take with the development of a new national maritime strategy for these islands that embraces the blue economy in its widest sense. From tackling the old chestnut of maritime boundary delimitation on which talks continue, to providing formal maritime training and work experience opportunities for young Caymanians, including cadetship program. The Maritime Authority has established itself as one of the world's top performing flag states and currently provides maritime regulatory compliance services to roughly 50% of the 30 meters and over global superyacht market. Yet there are no naval architecture firms either based or working out of Cayman. Neither are there any yacht, ship, or crew management companies operating out of here either. Mr. Speaker, the continuous development and implementation of this national maritime strategy can only help to propel these islands forward by creating complementary activities that will help diversify our economy beyond tourism and international financial services. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to the potential of a cross-ministry approach with the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Tourism to explore career opportunities for our younger Caymanian men and women to gain employment on some of the very cruise lines that visit our shores. Mr. Speaker, the Maritime Authority is Cayman's maritime administrator, and it serves the global shipping community. It ensures effective implementation of relevant international maritime and related conventions that have been ratified by the UK government and extended to Cayman. One of Macy's primary roles is to stay abreast of international shipping industry developments, particularly the numerous international conventions and instruments affecting ships and their operation. Where appropriate, Macy gives input in their development. To this end, it attends meetings of various international bodies where policy and standards are agreed. These bodies include the International Maritime Organization, commonly referred to as IMO, the main body responsible for prescribing international standards and requirements with respect to safety of life at sea, maritime security, and the protection of the marine environment. The International Labour Organization, known as ILO, which establishes internationally agreed upon standards for seafarers' employment and working conditions, and the Caribbean Port State Control Committee of the Caribbean Memorandum of Understanding on Port State Control. Other organizations whose activities significantly impact international shipping in regards to Cayman flag vessels include the International Association of Classified Societies, the United States Coast Guard, various signatories to other regional memoranda on port state control, and increasingly, the European Union. Macy's regular functions include the Cayman Islands Shipping Registry, implementing Cayman's maritime safety and security, marine pollution prevention, and social responsibility obligations under international conventions and code and under Cayman legislation for Cayman-flagged vessels. Implementing Cayman's obligations under foreign flag vessels entering into Cayman ports. Representing Cayman at international fora to protect its maritime interests, and also helping with efforts to facilitate Cayman's development into an international maritime center. In addition to these functions, Macy's achievement over the past 12 months include implemented the PDMS Mars survey platform to issue electronic certificates and develop electronic certificates of British registries that will be verifiable through the Cayman Registry website. Macy also maintained the whitelist status under the Paris, Tokyo, and US Quail Ship 21 port state control systems, which allowed Cayman registered vessels to undergo less port state control inspections while in Europe, Asian, and US waters. Macy also ended 2020 with 2,304 vessels registered on the Cayman Islands flag, the highest in its history, and with a total tonnage of 5.96 GTR. Successfully completed the IMO III code, and as Cayman's representative, was re-elected as vice chair for the Caribbean Port State Control Committee for the Caribbean Memorandum of Understanding on Port State Control for a further 3-year term. Mr. Speaker, Macy has 3 strategic initiatives planned for the coming calendar year. It will be continuing the collaboration with major yacht refit yards to encourage the use of codes and Cayman yacht specialist advice during the refitting process. Continuing automating its processes, including introducing an e-register and further development of electronic certificates to other service areas. And lastly, continuing to make efforts to reduce costs, enhance efficiencies, and generate revenue while adjusting to a new business-friendly environment in government. Mr. Speaker, I will now turn to the Civil Aviation Authority. The Civil Aviation Authority oversees the aviation safety and international aircraft registration. Stringent standards and a mandate for absolute safety compliance have guided the authority's oversight of Cayman registered aircraft for more than 50 years. As a result, the Civil Aviation Authority's aircraft register is globally recognized by owners, financiers, management companies, and other aviation industry decision makers. Its strategic vision is for a safe and credible aviation industry in the Cayman Islands, with a mission of enhancing aviation safety performance through effective regulatory oversight. The Aviation Authority therefore operates according to statutory legislation predicated on the UK legal framework. 2 major governing pieces of this legislation are the Air Navigation Overseas Territories Order 2013, which contains regulations governing the operational and airworthiness requirements of Cayman registered aircraft, and the Overseas Territories Aviation Requirements, which contain guidance from the UK government for all overseas territories. Despite challenges presented by the onset of the pandemic, the Civil Aviation Authority met its regulatory obligations. They maintained its financial stability and protected their staff's well-being. Through its secured electronic data management resources and processes, they have been in place for many years. Staff and contracted inspectors work remotely with clients globally in their own time zones. Mr. Speaker, the Civil Aviation Authority's client base also experienced difficulties in the past 12 months. The international aviation industry was particularly negatively impacted by the pandemic, with countries closing borders, leisure and business travel being halted, and airlines either reducing flights or halting operations altogether. International Civil Aviation Organization stats help to tell this story. Similar statistics were recorded in relation to international passenger traffic. However, the authority was sustained throughout the pandemic by measures it implemented in 2018 to grow the base for the Cayman Islands.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move the relevant standing orders to suspend the hour of interruption for 10:02 for the debate to continue.
Question is, the standing order 10 to be suspended in order for the business of the House to continue after 4:30. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The member may continue.
Going forward, Mr. Speaker, the authority has a number of key targets. It is reviewing its longer-term strategic plan to extend it to 2025. This will position the authority for strategic growth as a sustainable statutory organization by outlining its plans to maintain its financial independence, embracing technology, I like this one, striving to Caymanize the authority with a highly specialized technical, experienced human resources team, and maintaining its full regulatory designation for safety and economic regulation of the Cayman Islands aviation industry. The authority also expects to oversee continued growth of the aircraft registry for operational register and transition aircraft. It will continue partnering with key industry members to effectively oversee aerodromes and all associated services, aircraft on the registry, local air operator holders, and foreign aircraft that operate to the jurisdiction. And for 2022, revenues of $7.66 million, an expenditure of $5.36 million, and in 2023, revenues of $7.86 million, an expenditure of $5.49 million. Mr. Speaker, I'm wrapping up. I only have one more authority left to speak on, which is the Auditor's Oversight Authority. Since May 2012, the Auditor's Oversight Authority has regulated and supervised recognized auditors who audit financial statements of certain entities. It operates a system of oversight, quality assurance, disciplinary action, and investigation, mainly through periodic on-site inspections. It began registering audit firms in January 2015, with the first inspection in May 2015, and the latest being conducted in early 2021. In 2017, the Ministry amended legislation to improve the Auditor's Oversight Authority's operation, chiefly by increasing its scope to include designated and specified companies and to facilitate easier international cooperation. While its resources are limited, the Auditor's Oversight Authority has a significant role regarding in our international reputation. It is a member of the International Forum of Independent Audit Regulators, a global body for audit regulators, which focuses on enhancing investor protection through improved audit quality worldwide. For its inspections, the Auditor's Oversight Authority uses teams affiliated with the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, a major UK professional body for accountants. Mr. Speaker, the authority's budget request will help the authority to support the work of the accounting sector and indeed the wider financial services industry by adhering to best practices and international standards. Mr. Speaker, in summary, the Ministry's 5 SAGCs are integral to Cayman's financial services and commerce industry. Their commercial activities are greatly respected by investors and contribute to government finances, and because of their performance, they have earned a global reputation for effective regulatory standards and practices. I again thank the Honourable Minister for Financial Services for allowing me to speak on these areas for financial services. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I just want to say that I'm so pleased to be a part of the government that is going to address many of the social ills that the people of the Cayman Islands have been facing. I am happy to see how my colleagues, Minister Andre Ebanks and Minister Jay Ebanks, have developed a cross-ministry initiative to deal with housing, which the people of West Bay will benefit from. Mr. Speaker, this government is not only focused on developing social housing, but also affordable housing. The vision that my colleagues have is that we will merge social housing along with affordable housing. This, Mr. Speaker, is progress. I thank the Minister of Planning and Infrastructure for committing to building these homes in West Bay on the Apple Blossoms location and also in Lighthouse Gardens. Because we have the land identified and available, I am pleased that we will be able to address housing issues in West Bay in short order. Mr. Speaker, I am also pleased that the Minister of Planning has committed to addressing many of the low-lying areas in my constituency. Additionally, I'd like to thank him for taking tours of West Bay with my colleagues. I'm grateful that we will be addressing some of the high-traffic streets in our district. One that is dear to me, although it's not in my constituency, is Reverend Blackman Road, which I think this is your area, Mr. Speaker, and I know that this is a road that you've expressed needs to be addressed due to frequent accidents and speeding. I'm also excited to see that the Deputy Premier is looking at ways in which PR applications are being considered. Many of our young Caymanians are struggling to secure homes because we have a large influx of property purchases being made to secure residency, and I'm excited to see that the Minister is willing to look at ways to protect and promote Caymanian home ownership. Additionally, I am happy that the Minister is looking at ways to ensure that work is developed in a way to ensure that all of our able-bodied Caymanians have their rightful place in the workforce. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I am thankful to be working with a group of representatives who have the one common goal to put our people first and to make Cayman work for Caymanians. I look forward to what we will all accomplish together with God's help. May God bless this honorable House and the Cayman Islands. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? That was the last call, and the member for Red Bay has risen, yes. The member for Red Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this opportunity at the start of my 22nd year in this honorable House to make a contribution to the debate on the throne speech and the budget address delivered by His Excellency, the Governor Martin Keith Roper, OBE, and the Honorable Deputy Premier on Friday. Mr. Speaker, before I get into the discussion about those speeches, though I believe I cannot not acknowledge and recognize the occurrence last night of one of the members of the opposition and one of my excellent ministers in the last administration having joined the government. Mr. Speaker, I am not, in fact, I'm tired of hearing about it, going to delve into the murky waters surrounding the creation of the current government after the last elections. But I will simply say this, Mr. Speaker. The Honorable Premier, in his speech, said the country had voted for change. I am not at all certain that that can stand up to any analysis, given the fact that 8 members of the previous government were elected and the entire PPM team was elected. All other members, except the Premier and the member for Savannah, were elected on their own platforms. And in many instances, seats that we the Alliance did not contest, we did not contest them because we made judgments, and in some cases we made agreements that should certain candidates there be elected, they would assist us in forming a government. That's all water under the bridge. But this I know, the country may not have voted for change, but change is what they've got. Mr. Speaker, I do believe that my dear friend, and I mean that sincerely, not facetiously, the Honorable Dwayne Seymour has made a bad political choice. And I told him so. I've told him so for the last 5 months. But he has made his choice. He's an experienced politician. He's a good man. He's a good representative. And politics aside, I consider him a dear friend. His heart is in the right place, without question. He stood with me, and His Excellency the Governor and the rest of my team through the really hard early days of the pandemic, when no one in the world really knew what to do. And many made fun of him, including some that are sitting over on the other side here with him now. But this I know. We held 65 press conferences on the trot. The minister and the governor were in attendance at each one. So, as they say in those old Western books that I used to love to read when I was a youngster, he's a man to ride the river with. You don't have to look to see where he is, he's going to be there. He doesn't frighten easily. He's a good man. And I do hope, Mr. Speaker, that he will be able to contribute to the work of the new government, because Lord knows they need all the help they can get. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, how so many of them can stand up in this house and preen the way I've heard some of them, not all of them, some of them do. They must be living in some parallel universe. Because I move around this island, every single district. I spend a lot of time these days in places of ill repute, some would say. But I learn what people are thinking and what is on the ground. And I can find no constituency of support, no approval of the way the government is managing and has managed the COVID pandemic since they took office. None. I understand that there is an assessment that is being written now that will be out published in another few weeks. We shall see what that says. But, Mr. Speaker, I can say this. Were I still the Premier, the management of this would have been very different. Very, very different. Mr. Speaker, without question, at some point, the country had to reopen. But I don't know who thought the point to reopen was when the virus was at its highest peak in terms of spread through the community, because that's where we are now. The one thing, Mr. Speaker, that I will say the government has done an excellent job on is continuing the vaccination program which we put in place, and having achieved a level of cover that, frankly, neither I nor anyone on my side thought was possible. And that is excellent. And that, Mr. Speaker, I hope continues to hold true, that the vaccine is preventing, I believe, us from having significant numbers of death, although every life lost is costly. But when you look at what has occurred in other countries, I think we can, at least for the time being, we don't know what this Omicron variant is going to do. No one does. But so far, so good, I think, would have to be my assessment of how well the vaccination is working. Although I did learn of another death today, but these, I believe, I don't know whether that individual is vaccinated or not. But, Mr. Speaker, the disaster of having allowed the community spread of the virus to the extent that it currently is, and there really is little sign that it is starting to, that is at peak and starting to fall off, is that it flies in the face and presents a major obstacle to the two main goals that any government would have. One, reopening so that our tourism business can start to come back. And two, that local business, many businesses, many of whom have been hanging on by their fingertips for the last 18 months, would start to be able to get the benefit of this new economic activity. But the community spread of the virus at the level it is scares local people away from events, from bars, from restaurants, from stores. And, Mr. Speaker, who in their right mind, seriously now, who in their right mind is going to travel to a country where the level of community spread of the virus is so high that you're almost guaranteed to get the virus for your vacation? And if you test positive for the virus, you are then going to be condemned to your hotel room until you test negative. Now, who is going to not volunteer for that? Who's going to pay for that privilege? If I'm a father in Minnesota, whatever, one of those cold states in the United States now, and I'm tired of the cold, tired of the fact that we haven't been able to travel for a couple of years, and I want to go to somewhere nice and sunny for Christmas. I say to the wife, let's go. Let's take the kids and let's go to Cayman. Lovely place. She says, but hon, the kids can't go because they can't be vaccinated. And if we go, we have to test negative before we go. We have to do a LFT on day 2, day 5, day 10. There is such a high level of the virus in the community now that the CDC has issued or caused to be issued a travel advisory saying that it is dangerous to travel to the Cayman Islands because you're almost guaranteed to get the virus. Who is going to pay for that privilege? To come to Cayman, to go through, have to leave the children home with grandma, have to leave the children home with grandma, have to do these tests, and if you're found positive, you're going to have to stay in your hotel room for your 8 days or 10 days or whatever length of time you plan to visit. The point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is that without effective control of the community transmission of the virus, the economy cannot and will not ever recover. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. Just look at what's happened all around the world. But let's stay in the region. Let's look at the Turks and Caicos Islands, with which most of us are familiar. Their success with getting tourists there is because they have managed to control the community spread of the virus. Not eliminate it, but keep the numbers low enough that people are not in constant fear once they observe the necessary protocols in terms of sanitization and mask wearing and social distancing. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't know how the government expects that there is going to be a return to anything approaching normalcy in relation to the tourism industry or indeed local trade if they don't do something or some things to slow the spread of the virus. Not one effective means or measure has been put in place since we had this breakout in September. We had gone 14 months without a single positive case. We can argue about whether it was brought here by drug runners from Jamaica, or we can argue about whether it's a reduction in the quarantine period to 5 days, or we can argue that it was moving to an honor system as to whether people stayed in the quarantine or not. It may well be all of those factors. But, Mr. Speaker, the current policy of the government seems to be we're going to let it run till it burns itself out. That may eventually work, but it hasn't worked in any country in the world so far. I know our population is small. But in the meantime, it is continuing to damage any economic recovery we could hope for. Mr. Speaker, somebody or somebodies need to get their arms around this issue. Somebody needs to develop some courage in terms of how we enforce the necessary protocols to slow the transmission of the virus. We've got to get off of that travel advisory level 4 list. We've got to be able to allow unvaccinated children to travel with their parents if we are to have any hope of tourism recovering. But instead of doing that, Mr. Speaker, it seems to me, and many people who speak to me on a regular basis, that they're experimenting with something else, proposing to bring a cruise ship here on the 28th of this month. Let's try to get one element of our tourism industry sorted before we go and introduce potentially increased risk of, now that we got this new variant of bringing the virus here. Again, we all know from the earliest days, the cruise ships have been the crucible of the spread of the virus because of the way the ships are set up and because of the close proximity with which people have to interact naturally. Mr. Speaker, the government must be deaf if they are not hearing what the people at CETA and elsewhere are saying about their lack of proper management of the industry. What I did with my phone? I just read an article just published in the Cayman Compass reporting on the CETA meeting, which was held yesterday, I believe. And Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I would just like to read that. It's available for everyone on their website. So I hope, Mr. Speaker, that I could be forgiven for not passing out copies of it. They can follow along with me if they wish. It's entitled, Tourism Chiefs Say Not Enough Caymanians to Fill Hospitality Jobs. And this leads me, Mr. Speaker, into another massive concern that is growing out there, not just in relation to tourism, but I'll deal with tourism first, about the non-action by immigration boards with respect to processing work permits. Mr. Speaker, this article is written by Ms. Norma Connolly. It's published today in the Cayman Compass. Tourism chiefs say not enough Caymanians to fill hospitality jobs. Even with every Caymanian who has expressed an interest in working in restaurants and hotels taking up a position, there will still be 600 to 700 jobs that need to be filled in those fields as the industry gears up to receive growing numbers of visitors, tourism chiefs say. According to Cayman Islands Tourism Association President Mark Langevin, I don't know how to say that name, about 50 Caymanians registered with Workforce Opportunities and Residency Cayman, or WORK, had indicated they would like to work in the food and beverage and hospitality industries. This leaves hundreds of jobs that would need to be filled with work permit holders, but work permits were not currently being approved, Langevin said, as he spoke at CETA's annual general meeting on Wednesday, the 30th of November. Speaking at the AGM at the Marriott Resort on Tuesday, 30th in November. I'm not sure which date is right. I'm just reading from the, but obviously it can be both. The association's Vice President Michael Tibbetts, owner of the Clearly Cayman Dive Resorts on all three islands, said there were three main problems facing the hospitality industry in Cayman: COVID-19 regulations that bar unvaccinated children from entering Cayman, air arrival capacity, and a lack of staff. Tibbetts said rules that prevent children that are too young to be vaccinated from coming to Cayman mean that the islands are not attractive as a holiday destination for families of young children. He added that many businesses are currently operating with a third of the staff that they would need to cater for tourists in their hotels and restaurants, noting that people who had worked in the hospitality industry, whether Caymanians or work permit holders, had settled into other jobs or sought work elsewhere.
Honorable member, where is that article found?
It is on the Cayman Compass website, sir. It was just published a few minutes ago.
Are you going to read much more from it? If you do, I would prefer to get a copy of it.
I can ask, it's fairly long, sir. It's fairly long.
And you want to read more from it? That's what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
I prefer to have a copy then.
I can ask.
We can take a break and you can get me a copy, please.
Mr. Speaker?
Sorry.
I believe I can do better than that. If I could ask the sergeant to arrange to have copies printed from the Cayman Compass website, and I'll come back to this, and I'll go on and talk about something else.
Saves time.
Yes, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, let me use the interlude to thank His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Martin Keith Roper, OBE, for his presentation of the throne speech, and indeed the new approach which he's adopted with respect to the throne speech, where he essentially sets out his stall, the areas for which he has constitutional responsibility and the issues around them, rather than simply a brief version of what the Premier will shortly say once he is complete. Mr. Speaker, I cannot say enough good things about His Excellency the Governor over the years that I had the privilege of working with him as Premier. That does not mean, Mr. Speaker, that we agreed on every single thing. Not suggesting that. But we certainly agreed on far more than we disagreed on. And we had a very, very good relationship. I thank him, Mr. Speaker, for his incredible support and advocacy for Cayman first. In the UK in particular, but elsewhere as well. He is a career diplomat and has contacts in many places in the world which proved to be very useful, very helpful to Cayman. And Mr. Speaker, one of the things I aimed to do as Premier was to try to improve the relationship we had with the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, I've never understood why we would not want to have the best possible relationship we do with our administering power, because nothing good will accrue to us if we are in a constant state of hostility with the UK. There are many issues on which we have to disagree with them or to take a different view, but I don't think that in disagreeing we necessarily need to be disagreeable. And the relationship with the UK, the improved relationship with the UK, has paid massive dividends over my 2 terms as Premier. Mr. Speaker, the constitutional changes we managed to get through, the support their support in dealing with the endless challenges which the financial services industry faces and will continue to face. Their agreement to allow us to develop the Coast Guard and the regiment. And, Mr. Speaker, most of all, I think, in most people's minds locally, their assistance and continued assistance with managing the COVID-19 pandemic. The governor was invaluable, absolutely invaluable, in his interventions on Cayman's behalf with the UK. Even now, we are still getting many things, including advice, free of any direct costs to the Cayman Islands government. Test kits, the LFT, advice from what was, I can't remember the new name, Public Health England. Countless ways the United Kingdom government has assisted Cayman and continues to assist Cayman, and I'm sure the other territories as well. And our governor has been at the forefront of ensuring that Cayman was able to benefit, advocating often for things which otherwise we would not have had. So, Mr. Speaker, I have nothing but good to say about His Excellency. I am pleased that it appears that the new Premier has also forged a good relationship with him, for that is absolutely key to getting things done for Cayman. His Excellency has been and remains a great ambassador for these islands as well. He advocates for a cause at every possible opportunity. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it only right that I take this opportunity to say that to him for us publicly, for I have not had another opportunity otherwise following the elections. And, Mr. Speaker, I would also like to thank the many, and they are in the thousands now, of people, civil servants and otherwise, who have assisted and continue to assist us to manage this COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Lee, Dr. Rodriguez-Williams, Dr. Hazel Brown, Mrs. Lizette Yearwood, Minister Seymour, Mr. Jonathan Smelly, and all the many members of staff. I'm sure I've left key people out, but Mr. Speaker, we could not have done and we could not have gotten to where we have without that level of commitment. And so, Mr. Speaker, despite my criticism of the current government's management of some aspects of this pandemic, without question, Cayman is still in one of the best positions any country in the world is, with so few deaths so far resulting from the pandemic. And that is a combination, that is the result of a combination of things, us being able to hold strain and keep the virus from spreading in the community until we were able to get people vaccinated. Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, right on cue, as I finish that little segment of my contribution, the good sergeant has delivered and brought a copy of the article from which I was reading. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, sir, may I read? Cayman Islands Tourism Association President Mark Langevin says that while the tourism industry welcomes the government expansion of the types of securely... Oh, this is not the article. No. Sorry, sir. Sarge, see there? Sarge. Mr. Speaker, the article which I wish to read is important because it sets out the concerns of the Cayman Islands Tourism Association about the government's current management or lack thereof of the tourism industry, and the government, and in particular the ministers, seeming lack of appreciation of what is necessary to make the tourism industry work, what is required to provide the services that tourists come and pay money for, in particular, staff. And I think it is important, Mr. Speaker, that this House, members of this House, appreciate what is happening and what is likely to happen over the course of the next few months. I perhaps should put that the other way, what is not going to happen. And what is not going to happen is we are not going to receive very many visitors until these sorts of issues, leaving aside the major issue of communities, continued community spread, major spread of the virus, we're not going to receive the visitors to fill these places, to rent the cars, to go into the restaurants, the bars, to go on tours, to go look at the stingrays. Without people here, none of these things are going to happen. And so, Mr. Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition called for yet again, the government seriously needs to reconsider the amount of the stipend that is being paid to persons who are out of employment or not making anywhere near what otherwise they would make, because tourism is still effectively shut down. The leader said 2,000, I would say 2,500 now, because it is clear that people who have been unemployed employed at a much reduced level, or earning from their businesses at a much reduced level for the last 18 months, are going to be looking like that for another year, easily. Mr. Langevin says in that article that we've already missed the Christmas season, and we've already missed January, simply because we just don't have the things in place that we need to have in place. Staff is one of the big issues. Mr. Speaker, Cayman has done incredibly well through this pandemic. I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, it has exceeded my greatest wishes and prayers. When we shut this economy down, because we knew effectively that's what we were doing to prevent the spread of the virus, we had the belief that this was going to create major economic shock to the system. We saw the possibility of many businesses failing. We understood that we, government, was going to have to support a lot of these. The Leader of the Opposition, who was then the Minister of Finance, will recall my going to him and saying, Minister, we need to get a contingency line of borrowing, because Cayman government cannot be in a position where we can't pay salaries, we can't pay vendors, and we can't help our people when they need it most. We are in an admirable position in terms of cash, or we were at that time, but we really foresaw that there was going to be massive economic fallout. Mr. Speaker, while there has been serious issues for many people, and government has been helping them, as I just said, they need to help them some more. But remarkably, once we were able to eliminate the virus from within our community, keep our people safe, and people started to realize, wow, I can go out, I can go to the bar, I can go to restaurants, I can go to the cinema, I can go to church. People started spending money in the local economy. I have friends who own businesses, hospitality businesses, bars and restaurants, 2 in particular. And of course, they were beating my ear when we had to lock down, even though they understood why. But they were all worrying about their businesses. The businesses, nowhere near what they were doing before, especially those that relied on tourism. But their businesses have kept going, Mr. Speaker. Since this outbreak in September, that has changed. Both of the businesses tell me that their businesses are down between 30% and 40%, depending on which week you're looking at. Now, Mr. Speaker, you introduce another factor where you tell them you can't get any permits, but you're talking about bringing tourists back. Mr. Speaker, I have the right copy now. I'll try again. Tourism chiefs say not enough Caymanians to fill hospitality jobs. Even with every Caymanian who has expressed an interest in working in restaurants and hotels taking up a position, there will be 600 to 700 jobs that need to be filled in those fields as the industry gears up to receive growing numbers of visitors, tourism chiefs say. According to Cayman Islands Tourism Association President Mark Langevin, about 50 Caymanians registered with work had indicated they would like to work in the food and beverage and hospitality industries. This leaves hundreds of jobs that would need to be filled with work permit holders, but work permits were not currently being approved, Langevin said, as he spoke at CETA's annual general meeting on Wednesday, the 30th of November. Speaking at the AGM at the Marriott Resort, the association's Vice President, Michael Tibbetts, owner of the Clearly Cayman Dive Resorts on all 3 islands, said there were 3 main problems facing the hospitality industry in Cayman: COVID-19 regulations that bar unvaccinated children from entering Cayman, air arrival capacity, and lack of staff. He added that many businesses are currently operating with 1/3 of the staff that they would need to cater for tourists in their hotels and restaurants, noting that people who had worked in the hospitality industry, whether Caymanians or work permit holders, had settled into other jobs or sought work elsewhere. Quote, "It's not like we can turn a switch and expect people to come back and restaff our resorts or water sports businesses and restaurants," unquote, he said. Tibbetts acknowledged that the issue of hiring workers and remobilizing the hospitality industry was a, quote, "politically sensitive," unquote, one, adding that CETA had made it a priority to hire Caymanians holding job fairs and submitting vacancies to work. Langevin said tourism in Cayman would not return to a substantial level, and this is important, until unvaccinated visitor children were allowed to travel with their parents without quarantine, until the regime of lateral flow testing for visitors was reduced, and until the travel authorization process was simplified and expedited. He added, "We will need to address," this is a quote, "we will need to address urgently the shortage in tourism workers, especially in food and beverage positions, recreation and diving operations, and getting the support of the work and the Cayman Islands government to develop fast-track access to work permits to ensure we are not limited in our recovery effort," unquote. Earlier this week, Tourism Minister Kenneth Bryan, speaking in Parliament during a budget debate, said he was committed to changing the face of Cayman's tourism industry by encouraging more Caymanians to get involved and invest in it. He noted that close to 700 Caymanians had upskilled during the lockdown period by participating in one or more of the 50 training courses that government had offered. Tibbetts, speaking at the AGM, said CETA had been prioritizing the hiring of Caymanians, but noted that even one type of job in a resort had enough local workers to fill it. There were others, such as dive instructors, servers, or cooks, that would also need to be filled before the business could cater to a full capacity of tourists, as, quote, there is this conundrum that hospitality is a team sport, unquote. Quote, we have to be able to hire a certain number of work permit holders to be able to get back our island economy, unquote, he said. Langevin said it did not appear that work permits were currently being processed. Quote, what we are hearing is the boards are not meeting because they are in training, unquote, he said. Quote, in the meantime, the clock is ticking, unquote. The CETA president told members that if businesses wanted to be fully staffed by Christmas, it was too late because the work permits would have had to be signed a month ago. Taking into account how long it takes a worker from overseas to arrange to come to Cayman, quarantine if necessary, and to be onboarded into the business. Quote, if we want to be back for an opening in mid-January, it's too late also, because those work permits would have needed to be signed by the 28th of November, unquote, he said, adding that if a business was aiming to deal with 50% capacity by the U.S. public holiday of President's Day on 21st February, work permits would have to be approved by the 28th of December. A spokesperson for work confirmed that the figure of 50 Caymanians quoted by CETA refers to individuals who are receiving the tourism stipend and who have registered with the agency as job seeker extended clients who had expressed a desire to work in the fields of food, beverage, culinary, and or as beach and pool attendants. Showing a PowerPoint slide outlining the current confirmed airline routes, Tibbetts said, at most air arrivals are currently at about 10% of normal capacity and look likely to be only at 30% by the end of the first quarter of 2022 and 40% by April. Langevin noted that as flights slowly increase in number, the local population will also be traveling, so it's not just tourists who will be booking the seats on the limited number of flights. Quote, it is compounding the problem here. We are certainly hoping to get more flights, quote, he said. Earlier this year, the Department of Tourism carried out a detailed survey of people who had lost their jobs in tourism after borders closed and who were receiving the stipend. Tourism Minister Bryan said at the time that the survey aimed to provide information to help guide the work of the Remobilization Committee to get displaced tourism workers back into the industry and find jobs for Caymanians interested or qualified to break into the tourism field. At the time, 3,398 people were receiving the monthly $1,500 stipend at a cost of $5 million a month to government. The survey indicated that 49% of respondents were not currently working, with the vast majority of those stating the stipend was their only source of income. Of the 51% who described themselves as employed, 74% or 1,158 people were considered underemployed and were working fewer than 30 hours a week, while 13% were in full employment. Of the 3,107 people who responded to the question of whether they would like to return to the same job in tourism that they held before the pandemic, 87% said they would. And then the rest is about a prize. But, Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very serious issue. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, before, we did get the correct copy of the article. The local economy has done amazingly well. But that is not the case currently, because the continued widespread of the virus is dampening people's willingness and enthusiasm to be out and about. My prediction is it's going to be a very, very bleak Christmas. Mr. Speaker, this issue with work permits, but particularly for the tourism industry, is one that the government needs to grapple with immediately. Mr. Speaker, I know, I'm not guessing, I know that administrators are not considering permits. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I would like to read just one very short of my many WhatsApp messages I get in the course of a day complaining about these things. Hi, latest mess, re-immigration. They have now removed all administrators from making any decisions on work permits. This includes business staffing plan approvals. They are severely backed up. We have work permits we put in October, and the date for some of them to be considered is now March. Others we put in are now not as yet receipted. Mr. Speaker, we are going to face a massive crisis over the next few months if the work permit process is not unplugged. That's the wrong word. Is not sorted out, Mr. Speaker. We know, we've heard the government say, jobs for Caymanians. We're all in favor of that, Mr. Speaker. Every single one in this House. Not one of us in here don't believe that Caymanians shouldn't get jobs first. The problem with getting workers in the tourism industry, in the hospitality industry in Cayman, is one that has plagued us since my generation was coming up through school. When teachers, parents, everybody, I don't want my child to work in no tourism industry. I want you to put on a white shirt and a necktie and go work in one of them banks. That was the mantra that was beat into us when I was growing up. The problem has existed since then. My colleague and then Deputy Premier and Minister for Tourism, the incredible work he did with the hospitality school, we all were very enthusiastic about that. But the numbers that we could get into the system, and then the even smaller numbers that come through at the end, nowhere near approach the number of personnel with the requisite skills that are necessary to operate one of the biggest tourism industries in the region. We've heard in here and from other forums, the Deputy Premier and the Minister for Tourism pounding this issue. Caymanians got to get jobs. We're going to fix them. We're going to fix the immigration. Mr. Speaker, we're going to fix it all right. We're going to fix it so our economy goes into free fall. That's what we're going to do. Mr. Speaker, the government needs to rethink these things. The rhetoric that started during the campaign and is still being spouted by government ministers, this anti-development, anti-immigration, anti-investor rhetoric, that, Mr. Speaker, is going to prove, if it is not stopped and another route charted fairly shortly, that is going to be the demise of our economy. Mr. Speaker, you know, they shouted it from every platform they were on, that the administration, which I had the honor to lead for 2 terms, we were all in favor of the developers and the elite. Mr. Speaker, any close analysis of not just the speeches which I made and the then Minister for Finance, the now leader of the opposition, made will tell you that is not the case. But speeches, anybody can say this, or anybody can read this. Look at what we did to help people, our own people, in those years. No, Mr. Speaker, we didn't get it all done, and we didn't get it all right. But who does? But we certainly worked hard, Mr. Speaker. And I could go through the long list, because I have it here, of the social intervention measures we put in place, from completely waiving stamp duty on it first purchase by a Caymanian of a home up to $400,000. And even if you bought one that was $600,000, we gave you the first $400,000, a waiver for the first $400,000 in terms of what stamp duty you had to pay. Look at what we did for the seamen in terms of their stipend. Veterans, people on permanent financial support, assistance, a whole range of things, Mr. Speaker. The incredible work that our Minister of Education, which at least the adopted one out there that knows what she's doing, did to make lives better for children in schools, salaries better for teachers, so that they can stay in the profession and teach our children. I don't want to go through all of that long list because it's just going to take up my time. There are no more people-driven, people-centered than we were. None. Just shouting it don't mean anything. Let's see what you do. But, Mr. Speaker, where we differ fundamentally in terms of philosophy and policy with the current government is that we understood that there is no monetary out there behind the government administration building that you can come and shake every day and get what you need. Mr. Speaker, when I heard the minister from Northside, the Minister for Planning and Infrastructure, Minister Ebanks, reading out the list of things that he was going to buy, the only thing it reminded me of was when my son Kalen was a little boy. He was driving in a car with his mother, and he liked to give you these long Christmas lists. He sent one to Aunt Debbie, he sent one to Mommy, and he sent one to me. And so she told him, she said, Kalen, Mommy and Daddy don't have the money to buy all those things. He said, no, Mommy, just stop here by Hurley's and go to the machine, the ATM. Because he'd seen us go there and get money. As a kid, he didn't understand. You got to put money in there to get money out. Mr. Speaker, when I listened to the Minister Ebanks, I said, my Lord, for all of his money, I would not want to be the Premier today. For all of the current Premier's money, I mean, I wouldn't want to be the Premier today. Mr. Speaker, I led the opposition for 2 years, the party for 10, and 8 years as Premier. Believe you me, if it is anybody who understands how difficult it is to get consensus around budget issues, Alden McLaughlin understands that. But even some of my strongest supporters, even the Deputy Premier confessed yesterday how they used to get vexed with me when I would tell them, listen, understand that any time you add another item of recurrent expenditure, you have done so for life. So it's not just the money that you have to spend this year to keep that policy in place, that program in place, or maintain that project. Every single year, you have to find the money, in good times and in bad. Mr. Speaker, I have searched, I have read it 3 times, even though he didn't want to give it to us. The Deputy Premier and Minister of Finance, I read it, the Hansards of his speech 3 times, searching for some kind of fiscal policy, some financial strategy. And I've got the best eyes in the world, but with these glasses, I see pretty good. I can't find anything, Mr. Speaker. Nothing approaching a fiscal strategy, a fiscal policy or financial strategy. Mr. Speaker, the closest thing I could find to it, and that's not in the speech, this is my assessment, I wrote it down somewhere, is borrow and spend. Borrow and spend. But, Mr. Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition said, this is not the United States of America. We can't print money like it's going out of style. Mr. Speaker, you know, because through all of my political life, you have been a factor. When we weren't warring, we were loving. That's how it had to go. I am a practical, pragmatic politician like yourself. Mr. Speaker, you know this keenly. You see that thing called the Great Recession, which came upon us about the starting the middle of 2008. Mr. Speaker, that taught me the biggest and I believe most important lesson of my political life. Because I came in as a young minister, Minister for Education, and a whole long line of other things. Education, training, employment, youth, sports, culture, financial services, pensions. Oh, I could do anything. I was Superman. That's what you think when you're 39 years old, right? So, but Mr. Speaker, we were determined we were going to build those schools. There had been no schools built in nearly 20 years, no government schools. Government did not have the finances to do it. You couldn't do it from general revenue. So we agreed a course of borrowing. None of us saw in 2005 the Great Recession coming in 2008. Mr. Speaker, government, and that happened when you were there because we lost the government in 2009, where civil service salaries had to be cut. Because government couldn't pay its way. You had to go float a major bond issue, which we still have. We paid down half of it, but it's still there. Mr. Speaker, I am slow to learn, but long to forget that which I have learned. Mr. Speaker, when God, in His grace, and the people of these islands gave me the opportunity to return to Cabinet again, and that time as Premier, I swore a solemn oath to myself, not to anybody else. I will never, if it is in my power, allow that to happen again. I'll resign as Premier before I allow my team to put me in a position where I am risking the financial stability of government. Because, Mr. Speaker, some of the younger, in terms of politics, members on the other side may not understand. Because it takes time to understand these things, no matter how bright you are, no matter how much education you got. That confidence is the most important currency any country has. Confidence. Confidence in the stability of the government and the systems. That is why investors will come and plonk down millions of dollars on a little rock like this. That long history of stable government, sound finances. But beyond that, Mr. Speaker, something, again, I do not believe that the members on the other side, or most of them, seem to grasp. And that is, without sound finances, without money in reserves, government does not have the ability to put in place and keep in place the social programs which they tout, and by and large, most of it by and large, we support. Unless government has the revenue, it cannot do things for the people. You've got to constantly balance these two things. You keep cussing the foreigners. Keep cussing them. Keep saying you don't want no investors. You don't need them. So see where we go, where we wind up. Mr. Speaker, our strategy, and we repeated it like a mantra. I'm only going to refer to the last two budgets we delivered. That is the last term. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, any minister of finance worth his or her salt should be proud of the budget they deliver. You see, what my minister did, look at that beautiful, it was even prettier on this side, it was red. This is just a black and white copy. 2018 to 2019 budgets, maintaining fiscal prudence and inducement to growth. The Honorable Roy M. McTaggart, JP, MLA, Minister for Finance and Economic Development, 27 October 2017. Within minutes of him having delivered this was up on the government website. Proud of the budget he delivered. Mr. Speaker, here's what he said, Mr. Speaker. There's a whole section, 2018 and 2019 fiscal policy. Our overriding fiscal strategy is to manage government's finances in such a manner that there are 1, substantial operating surpluses each year, 2, no new fees or taxes levied on the public, and 3, no new borrowings apart from refinancing an element of the 2019 bond. And then he goes into all of the detail relating to that. In 2021, another beautiful document, Strong Economy, Stable Finances, a Successful Cayman, he entitled it. Fiscal policy. Our overriding fiscal strategy is sustainably manage the government's finances by adhering to the following guiding tenets: compliance with the principles of responsible financial management, no new fees or taxes levied on the public, no new borrowings. And then he goes into the detail. Mr. Speaker, there is no such heading in the Honorable Minister of Finance's address from Friday. I see a whole lot of politics in there. And as I say, I have been here for 21 years. Not quite 21 budgets because we shifted to two budgets for a term, but pretty close to 20 budget addresses I've listened to. I've never seen the finance minister's budget address so politicized. You leave that for the premier or leader government business, as was at one time, to do those things, because the heritage of this came from a time when civil servants, the financial secretary, delivered a budget address. Plenty of time for politics, but we're dealing now with the financial welfare of the nation. You need to be talking numbers. You need to be talking financial strategy, fiscal policy. You need to be examining what's happening elsewhere in the world. Not cut and, what a word, I forget that. Mr. Speaker, our great fear on this side, that this borrow and spend fiscal policy that appears to be what the government has chosen to do is going to end us up in a very bad place. Because all of these things are linked, Mr. Speaker. You know why we are doing, or the budget is in as good a shape as it is there in terms of comparison with the original forecasts, despite COVID? Because of the battle that I and the AG and a number of others fought with the financial services industry, who didn't want to bring more of the funds within scope and to get and have to pay fees for them. That's where that $51 million extra came from. But you can't look, Mr. Speaker, for those sort of windfalls every year. And it is now quite apparent that any recovery of the tourism industry is going to be very, very slow. And you're talking down development and construction. You're pressuring businesses that need work permits. Where is the economic drivers going to come from that are going to allow us not just to fund the budget, which is just under $2 billion Cayman Islands dollars over the 2-year period. But now you got to pay back interest and principal on nearly $350 million that you're going to borrow. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition put it absolutely right. What this budget represents is a failure on the part of the Premier and the Deputy Premier, who's the Minister of Finance, to get their team to understand that not everything they wanted they could get, that there were going to be some items on Minister J.E. Banks' Christmas list that you just couldn't afford to buy. Mr. Speaker, we went 8 years without borrowing 1 cent to fund capital projects. Not one. And the contingency that we put in place was not to allow us, if we had been back in government or any other government, to go spend willy-nilly on capital projects as though government was way in the black. It was our concern to ensure continuity of government if the worst scenario that we could consider did occur. But in the first 2 years of their term, they are proposing to spend even $20 million more than we had originally agreed as contingency borrowing. So, Mr. Speaker, I say, where is the money going to come from? to repay this loan? I looked to see what financial strategies were in place to ensure an increase in revenue to government. What specific ones they were? Mr. Speaker, all I can conclude from the absence of it in the document, because I've been around government a long time, is that they've simply adopted the old way of going about this, where you presumed that there would be year-on-year growth in terms of government revenue. I don't know how anyone can come to that conclusion in the present global environment. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to tempt your patience some more, sir. There is an article, and I think I did bring 2 copies this time, which bears reading in The Economist, 28th of November. 3 days ago? Yeah. Entitled, Between a Rock and a Hard Place. Mr. Sergeant, may I ask you to hand this to me? Between a rock and a hard place, 3 threats to the global economic recovery: tightening American monetary policy, slowing China, and the Omicron variant. The news as the 2nd anniversary of the pandemic nears could be better. The emergence of a COVID-19 variant labeled Omicron has sparked a wave of selling on financial markets, seemingly unconcerned that a new, highly transmissible strain of the virus could set back economic recoveries worldwide. Yet even if Omicron proves manageable, 2022 will probably be an economically trying one, as countries are squeezed between 2 formidable economic forces: tighter American monetary policy and slower growth in China. America and China loom over the global economy. Together, they account for 40% of global GDP at market exchange rates. The 2 giants tend to influence other economies in different ways, however. For many emerging countries, strong growth in America is a double-edged sword. The expansionary effect of its household spending is often overshadowed by the effect of its monetary policy, given the critical role of the dollar and treasury bonds in the global financial system. Tighter American monetary policy is often associated with a declining global risk appetite. Capital flows towards emerging markets tend to ebb. A strengthening dollar reduces trade flows because of the greenback's role in trade invoicing. China's effect on the world is more straightforward. It is, by a large margin, the world's biggest consumer of aluminum, coal, cotton, and soybeans, among other commodities, and a major importer of goods ranging from capital equipment to wine. When China falters, exporters around the world feel the pain. The year ahead will not be the first time economies have been forced to navigate the treacherous waters between the 2 dangers. In the mid-2010s, vulnerable emerging markets were squeezed by a rising dollar, as the Federal Reserve withdrew the monetary support provided during the global financial crisis, while a badly managed round of financial market liberalization and credit tightening triggered a slump in China. Growth across emerging markets, excluding China, sagged from 5.3% in 2011 to just 3.2% in 2015. The squeeze this time could well be more painful. In the 2010s, a weak recovery and stubbornly low inflation forced the Fed to go slow. More than 2.5 years elapsed between the Fed's announcement of its intention to reduce its asset purchases and the first rise in its policy rate. This time around, by contrast, The 12 months following the Fed's announcement of its plan to begin tapering in November are likely to involve a complete halt to bond buying, and according to market pricing, at least 2 interest rate rises. China, for its part, seems at greater risk of a hard landing today than it was a half-decade ago. Then the government responded to slackening growth by opening the credit taps, helping reinflate a housing bubble. The property market has since become only more overextended, and the debt loads of households and firms have risen. Economic officials now deliver regular, ominous warnings about the adjustment ahead. Though the IMF still forecasts that China will grow by 5.6% in 2022, that would, with the exception of 2020, be the lowest rate since 1990. China's importance for the global economy has only increased since the 2010s, and the world remains vulnerable to shocks. Debt loads soared during the pandemic. The continued spread of COVID-19 is likely to place further demands on governments. Analysis of past episodes of Fed tightening suggests that an increase in interest rates prompted by strong American demand is modestly beneficial to emerging economies on a sound macroeconomic footing. But for more fragile economies, it can be destabilizing. In order to assess which places face the biggest squeeze from tighter American monetary policy, The Economist has gathered data on a few key macroeconomic variables for 60 large economies, both rich and developing. Large current account deficits, high levels of debt, and of short-term debt owed to foreigners especially, rampant inflation, and insufficient foreign exchange reserves all spell trouble for economies facing fickle capital flows as American policy tightens. Combining countries' performance on these indicators yields a vulnerability index on which higher scores translate into greater fragility. The pressure is already on in some places. Argentina, which tops the list, faces an inflation rate above 50% and a deepening economic crisis. Turkey's fundamentals look a little better, but its woes are compounded by the government's stubborn desire to lower interest rates in the face of soaring prices. The lira has been hammered, losing nearly 40% against the dollar in 2021, diminishing the purchasing power of Turks' wages and pensions. Very high debt loads in some rich countries push them onto the list. Markets typically extend the rich. That line is missing. In other words, give them more breathing room. But if global financial conditions tighten substantially, then European leaders may need to do more to persuade punters that Greece will not be allowed to fall into serious trouble. Among big emerging economies, Brazil looks most vulnerable. Ranking the same 60 economies by their exports to China as a share of their own GDP yields an index of vulnerability to the mainland. Many of the biggest exporters to China, like Singapore and South Korea, pardon me, Mr. Speaker, my throat got dry. Many of the biggest exporters to China, like Singapore and South Korea, are critical links in manufacturing supply chains. They should be untroubled as China's domestic economy slows, as long as Americans keep shopping. Flagging Chinese growth could batter Australia, which exports resources to China, and Germany, whose industrial equipment firms depend heavily on Chinese customers. But at greater risk are the poor commodities exporters that have helped feed China's population and provide for its building boom. This gauge of exposure to China can then be compared with a measure of vulnerability to American monetary policy tightening. Some countries' fates are more linked to one of the giants than the others. Others, such as Brazil and Chile, appear most likely to suffer from a double whammy. Despite high levels of debt and soaring inflation, high commodity prices have enabled Brazil to just about maintain investors' confidence. A softening Chinese economy could deprive Brazil of that benefit, leading to a tumbling currency, even higher inflation, and the possibility of economic crisis. Conditions might worsen if tighter American monetary policy exacerbates a Chinese slowdown. Though China's enormous pile of foreign exchange reserves provides it with a buffer, it has also received large financial flows over the past 2 years, which have boosted the value of the yuan.
Honorable
The yuan.
member, what page are you on?
Page 6, sir.
Page 6?
Yeah, almost finished.
And which, page 6?
The numbers are in the right-hand corner, sir.
Yes, yes. I trying to find out which paragraph you're on.
I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Well, read until you begin a new paragraph, if you intend to continue reading this article, because I'm going to take the evening's break.
Yes, sir. I'll be finished in 2 minutes, sir.
In 2 minutes?
Yeah, or less.
Okay, yes, okay.
Conditions might worsen if tighter American monetary policy exacerbates the Chinese slowdown. Though China's enormous pile of foreign exchange reserves provides it with a buffer, it has also received large financial flows over the past 2 years, which have boosted the value of the yuan. Global banks' claims on China surged by nearly $200 billion from 2020 to 2021 to nearly $1 trillion. A sudden unwinding of those flows could lead to a sharp depreciation, not unlike the one that destabilized markets in the mid-2010s. The emergence of Omicron adds fresh uncertainty. Little is known yet about the economic damage that the variant might wreak. As equity prices tumbled on November 26th, investors nudged down their expectations of the pace of American rate rises next year. But this may not bring much respite to weak economies. Many currencies tumbled against the dollar amid a flight to safety. That, if it continues, is not dissimilar to the effects of sustained American monetary tightening. If Omicron were also to depress trade and growth, then its spread would further amplify the pressures facing vulnerable economies. The sailing will be anything but smooth. On the point, Mr. Speaker, of that rather technical and lengthy article, of my reading it is to say that all of the indicators that are now available are saying that we are in for a very uncertain time. And proposing a budget with massive borrowing, with deficits predicted for the current year and next year, and the smallest of surpluses predicted for 2023 can only be described, Mr. Speaker, in my view, as reckless. I'll pause there, Mr. Speaker.
Member, you intend to use your full time?
I shall speak, sir, till I've covered all my points or I've run out of time, whichever comes first.
We'll take the evening suspension until 7 o'clock.